Regeneration Transport Infrastructure Committee. Thank you for coming and attending during August. Don't usually have that many council meetings, but we've got a lot of work to get through, so I appreciate your giving your time up. It's a little bit of housekeeping. If you have got your mobile phones with you, please have them to silent, please, so we don't get interrupted. There are no fire drills planned, so if the fire alarm goes off, we do need to evacuate, and do not use the lifts, but there's the staircases, the front staircases and the rear staircases are led safely out into an area away from the building. So just going to go through the apologies. So I've got apologies from Councillor Beston. I don't know if we're able to get a replacement for that, for Councillor Beston. I think there was supposed to be someone, but I'm not sure they're able to come now. And we've also got Councillor Paul Fuller is unable to come, but we've got Councillor Jeffries, who's a substitute. So welcome, Councillor Jeffries. And we've also, unfortunately, Mr. Rowlands, don't have to give you apologies, but I'll just say that you normally here in person, but are able to be here with us this evening. So I think that's all the apologies. I think Sarah, everyone else is here. So that's the first part of the meeting dealt with. The minutes, I have the minutes part of our papers there. Are there any changes or just change the minutes from the committee? Nope, so I'll sign those then. So we're all happy to pass those minutes. Thank you. That's everybody. I think Councillor Stewart, you happy with the minutes? Yes. You're abstaining, you're approved. Okay, thank you. I'll just sign those off then. We'll sign now for you. Each page and then. Sure.
Each page. It's on the back page.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Are there any members that declare an interest they might have any matters on the agenda this evening? No? Great, thank you. So we'll move on to our public question time. I haven't had any written questions come through, but we do have some members of the public upstairs who I've actually spoken to, and I believe they do have a question. So if you'd like to come up to the microphone and ask the question, if you just state your name and your question then, please.
Hello, thank you, Mrs. Chairman. I'm Margaret Castle and I am from the Camp Hill estate, the prison estate. And my question tonight is, in review of why the question is here, it's about the barriers that were put up at the top of Clissold Road. I would like to ask if the council can write to the Ministry of Justice to initiate the removal of the bollards completely to make the roundabout at the top of Clissold Road safe. At present, one barrier has been removed to the side by persons unknown, hasn't been put back by the MOJ, so we're taking it they're happy with it. It does allow access up Clissold Road and round the roundabout in a safe manner. However, to go down Clissold Road, you have to go round the roundabout the wrong way, making it very unsafe. There is no indication with signage that the barriers are there. This has still not been put there by the MOJ, which has been requested, and we feel it is an accident waiting to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Cassell. Thank you very much for your question. You may be aware that we've got an urgent, I've accepted an urgent question from Councillor Garrett because there was a referral from our full council on this matter. Thank you for the updated information. The committee will decide how we're going to deal with it. But I think your suggestion of a letter to the MOJ asking for that is very reasonable. And I think we'll work with the local member to make sure we get all the facts and figures right in drafting such a letter. Would you like a supplementary, Mrs. Castle?
No, thank you very much. I will leave it to councillor Garrett to continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there a second question? No, that's all right. Okay, thank you very much. There are no more members of the public want to ask questions, so we'll move on to members' question time. I've had two questions. One I'll notice from Councillor Sarah Redrup, which I will read, and a response. And there's also, so as I said earlier, there's an urgent question I've accepted from Councillor Garrett, so I'll move on to that after I finish with this one. So the written question from Councillor Sarah Redrup, and all questions come to the chair, as you know. Given the coroner's Regulation 28 report following the death of Jacqueline Valvona in Wootton in 2018, identified the lack of a safe pedestrian crossing on the A3054 near the Sloot Inn as a risk likely to cause future deaths, and that residents have repeatedly raised this as their number one concern, feeling their warnings are not being heard or acted upon, and now with another serious collision at the Sloot Bridge last week, what specific action will the council take to address this ongoing danger, and on what timescale? Will the council commit to treating this location as a priority for road safety improvements? This question came in on Tuesday, and officers have prepared a response. There's obviously a lot of history to this that I'm personally not aware of, and some technicality. So those responses coming from me on behalf of the committee, we only received this afternoon, and this is an officer response. So just to be clear, with that regard, it's just the way that our new constitution is written. Right. The location of the 2018 collision was outside the Sloot Public House at a central point between the western and eastern access points to Mill Square. The pavement on the north side of the road stops at the western boundary to Wootton Bridge. There is no pavement for pedestrians across the bridge on the north side of the road, with the only continuous access between Wootton and Fishbourne on the south side of the road. There will be no benefit to constructing a crossing in the exact collision location due to lack of pavement on the north side of the road, and it isn't possible to extend the pavement there due to the road width and the bridge. The nearest place that a crossing could be constructed is between the two bus stops. However, it is not recommended for safety reasons, as drivers' view of the signal heads and pedestrians crossing would be obstructed by stationary buses. The distance between Station Road and Firestone Copse Road is 1 kilometre. In this length of road, there are 3 controlled pedestrian facilities and 2 pedestrian refuges, so there are existing identified safe crossing points on average every 200 metres. An initial feasibility assessment was carried out at the site, and the results of the site observations were that the number of pedestrians crossing at the point of the 2018 collision were minimal. This is probably due to the number and proximity of the existing crossing points. Therefore, although a fatality took place at the site, this is not a natural desire line for the majority of pedestrians, and a pedestrian crossing would be very underused. A refresh of the feasibility study will take place to see if any of the factors, e.g. the number of accidents, cost and relative proximity to other sites have changed since the original study, but currently the road layout in the area does not support the installation of a safe crossing point in that location. The study would instead focus on if there are any improvements or enhancements required to the existing crossing points. The collision that took place last week did not involve pedestrians and is still under investigation, so the council cannot currently comment on this. Thank you. Councillor Brodie.
Chair, yeah, I'd just like to make a remark about that response. And I have to say, in a long time, I don't think I've heard a more depressing and more disappointing response to a member of the council. This refers to the opinion of Her Majesty, His Majesty, I suppose now, but Her Majesty's coroner at the time, opinion regarding a death at this very point, and where they said very clearly there was a risk likely to cause future deaths. And Councillor Redrup and the community of Wootton just essentially seem to have been fobbed off. the statement an initial feasibility assessment was carried out. I'd like to know who that was by. I mean, all in all, it just represents, and I'll refer to this later in a performance management, the prioritisation of road transport on this island compared to pedestrians and the life of pedestrians and the life of cyclists. And I disassociate myself entirely from that response. Thank you, Chair.
Noted, Councillor Brodie. Thank you.
Councillor Brodie, thank you for that response. And mine is along similar lines. I use that road regularly, and obviously I'm in Wootton on a regular basis. I would utterly disagree. You always see people trying to dash across the road at that point. There are changes to commercial premises, including the lakeside, and you repeatedly see people trying to cross. One of the things about problems with feasibility studies is that if you put people off, you won't see as many people there as would be appropriately using it. The problem with refuge is in the middle of the road is that fundamentally you have to get to them. That's an extremely busy road. It has become busier. There have been a lot of issues with that road and Lushington Hill more recently. It seems to me that the response is we have had a quick look. We don't see anything major. We don't see any point in trying to do something. The community, this was one of the major things that was raised with us when we were canvassing there when Sarah was elected. I would strongly urge the council generally to consider how they might follow the wishes, expressed concerns from the coroner's report, and look at whether it is possible to create a formal pedestrian crossing at this point.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Councillor John.
Thank you, Chair. I think if we fail as a council to heed the view of a ward councillor and the intimate knowledge of that area by the local community and the learned opinion of a coroner, I think we're heading down a very strange road indeed. So I'm going to endorse the view that was expressed just now by Councillor Brodie as well, and likewise disassociate myself from this response. I think there's a clear indication here of danger. The community have spelled it out, the ward councillor has spelled it out, the coroner has picked on it. It should not come as a surprise to anyone that the number of pedestrians currently crossing at what is obviously regarded as a dangerous place is not that great. But perhaps if there was a crossing, people would find it safe to cross there. And it's our duty to make sure that pedestrians, I'm stressing that word, are safe compared with road traffic. Thank you.
Thank you for all your comments. And I think if I was to give my own response from the chair, I would back your comments. In my ward in Mill Street, I've got an issue that's been going on for 13 years. Thankfully, we haven't had a fatality. However, the environment for pedestrians is totally subservient to the environment for vehicles, and this has to change. And I'm hoping that our Green Link project will be able to address some of those issues right through the centre of town. So, I've got a very busy ward, so I do understand the issues here, and I think if officers are listening, I think the view that you've heard from the committee today would be, we would really like this, a refresh of the feasibility study should look at everything, including potentially installation of a safe crossing point. I think in the response it's been that won't be looked at again. So the social focus on any improvements or enhancements required to existing crossing points. So if that could be looked at, but also initially go back to look at the availability or how we could have a safe crossing on that point. If I summed up everybody's response there safely. So thank you. Sorry, I've got all the urgent question I've accepted from Councillor Garrett. It came in within the hour of the committee meeting starting, so thank you. This is a bit of a slightly convoluted issue. Well, not process, I think. We had Mrs. Cassell and we had discussion at our last committee, and Councillor Garrett was here as well. It then got referred to, it was a question at full council as well. In our procedure rules, it allowed a question, sorry, it allowed the matter following on from the question at full council, allowed the matter to come back to this committee. However, the constitution is silent on how we deal with this, and it was not picked up during the preparation of the agenda. So hence why we have shoehorned it into this part of the meeting. Luckily, we had a method to be able to do that. So that's why it's here before us. So it's silent on how we deal with it, but I think what we'll do, we'll hear from Councillor Garrett, and then we'll just decide how to move forward. And I did indicate earlier when I spoke to Ms. Cassell how we may deal with it, but then that's up for us to decide as committee. So Councillor Garrett, would you like to ask a question, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for enabling it in this way. And certainly Mrs. Cassell's question earlier has highlighted the further urgency around the nature of this question, given the hazard that is now in place at the roundabout at the top of Clissold Road. So the question is will the committee consider writing to the Ministry of Justice to seek clarity for residents on when and how the Ministry and the prison will engage with residents across the prison estates? Will the blocks be removed so that Camp Hill residents in particular fully regain their right of way, given that residents there are concerned that this won't happen until the barriers are installed? How will the barriers allow for all residents to have access, which is a particular concern, being that this should be on a resident basis and not just on a household basis? And given that there's blockages not just on Clissold Road, but on Lonsdale Avenue, to seek clarity on whether this is just an action for the MOJ has suggested that it's going to go forward with on Clissold Road, or will Lonsdale Avenue through to Rook Street be included in their plans for barriers? And thank you again, Chair, for working with me on this constitutional point.
Thank you for the question. Thank you for the support of residents as well. I think it's important you're acting on behalf of your residents at this difficult situation, and particularly thanks to Mr. Cassell coming back again to the council. So you're asking us, will we consider writing? My response, but also go on to committee members, is yes, we will absolutely do that. I would prefer if you would help us, given your intimate knowledge of the issue. No one knows more than the ward member, so we can get that drafted and sent off, if that's amenable to you, Councillor Garrett. Invite members of the committee. Is there any other way you'd like to deal with this, or do you support this proposal? Support the proposal? Yeah. Okay, then, lovely. So we're more than happy to do that with your assistance. Thank you. And did you have a supplementary question, Councillor Garrett?
No, I just to thank you and the committee for that support. Anything we can get out of the Ministry of Justice, which is sometimes quite slow at getting back to elected members and to residents. So if this can stimulate a response, it will be well received. Thank you.
I understand our local MP. Richard Quigley is also on the case as well, but I think it helps that we lend our support as well. So happy to do that for you. Thank you. Now go on to our rest of our agenda. So this is receiving a briefing on roadworks management lessons learnt, and this is going to be presented by Michelle Love, and we've also got Island Roads here in support as well. So we don't have it. I guess you're just going to be doing the presentations, are you? And then as a committee, we'd like to ask you some questions.
Yeah.
Would you like to do your are you doing separate presentations, or
no,
is it going to be a?
We have slides, so that would hopefully make it a little bit easier for understanding rather than just talking at you. So
Yes.
I'm just about to put them on the screen.
Yeah.
That'll last about 20 minutes.
Yeah.
What we've done is that goes over an overview. So because obviously it's not just Horsebridge Hill, I'm sure you all receive a lot of correspondence about roadworks throughout your wards. So we're doing an overview, and then obviously that will allow time afterwards to ask those specific questions from the overview that we've given, that you can then relate it back to the Horsebridge Hill works if you would like, but hopefully it will provide you with that information so that if there are any other major schemes within your ward or even minor ones, because it follows the same pattern, that you will have that information to hand, and we can include the slides. Does everybody know our colleagues from Island Roads, or would you like a quick introduction?
So members, are you going to have a 20-minute presentation? Are you happy to keep your questions to the end? We'll do a round of questioning around then, because there may be something that's mentioned in the presentation that we may be preempting. So I think it might be helpful to have the whole presentation first. Councillor Jarman.
Could we just ask that as we're having a presentation, a copy of the presentation deck is added to the website associated with this meeting afterwards, not just relying on people being able to watch the video? Thank you.
Yeah, the slides.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
It can go out with, it can be put on the website alongside the minutes, as it will be referenced within them.
That's really helpful. I'll always have because the YouTube as well will be up there as well, so we can the link, perhaps the link for YouTube as well can be there. Yes, so it'd be great if you can introduce yourselves. That'd be wonderful. Thank you very much, Mrs. Love.
Of course, I'm Michelle Love, Service Director of Highways and Community Protection. You probably know who I am. I'll move to my right.
I'm Rob Gillespie. I'm the Chief Executive of Island Roads.
Hello, I'm Steve Ashman. I'm a Service Director for Ringway Island Roads.
Yeah, and I'm Jimmy Wells. I'm the Network Manager at Island Roads.
Thank you. Right, I'll just move over there because the lead doesn't stretch as far as my chair, and do the technical bit, and then we'll start the presentation, and then we're happy to take questions about general management of roadworks, and if you have specific questions about Horsebridge Hill as well.
Thank you very much. To say, members, although the constitution is silent to what we do with the briefing here, we are following on from other committees. I do believe we could any outcomes or recommendations we can put forward as a committee. So if you want to keep that in mind when we come to the end of the time on this, it's always good to have an outcome, isn't it?
So everyone can see one of those screens. Yep, lovely. Okay,
Thanks very much. Good afternoon, everybody. So I thought we'd start with a bit of the legislation behind how we as Island Roads manage the network on behalf of the council, and where the council gets some of the legislation from in managing roadworks and streetworks. There's a slight difference. So streetworks is predominantly utility companies, roadworks is the works undertaken on behalf of the Highway Authority. So the first thing we come to is the Traffic Management Act of 2004. So that was brought in order to tackle the congestion and disruption on the highway. And it gave certain rights to the local highway authority. Basically a set of tools that the council could use and highway authorities can use across the country in order to manage the highway network. Part of that responsibility placed on the highway authority was to put in place the provision for the appointment of an officer known locally as the traffic manager. So ultimately the person within the authority that has the responsibility for managing the highway network. Please, Michelle. Off the back of the Traffic Management Act gave basically some of the powers from the new Roads and Streetworks Act of 1991. So what that did is gave the power to coordinate works to minimize disruption. So not only did it enable the management of highways as far as works happening, it also gave utilities and other undertakers of works a defined set of rules, if you like, to determine the standard at which they had to work. It then moved on further again, onto my next slide, that they then produced, this is from the Department of Transport, a set of code of practices to by which we work as Island Roads and manage for the authority. Code of practice for inspections. So that's basically how often we will go out and look at works being undertaken on the highway, what we're looking for, and the compliance behind that. The code of practice for reinstatement is exactly kind of what it says on the tin. Once the road's been excavated or footway's been excavated, how is that then reinstated, and what does that quality of reinstatement look like? So that's things like for like materials. So what materials can be used? How is that construction undertaken? Does it meet a defined standard that we would need in order to be able to effectively then take that back into the highway network once the reinstatement has been completed and the guarantee period from the utility companies is finished? Further on from that is then the code of practice for the coordination of works. So that takes us into effectively what powers do the local highway authority have in coordinating a highway network with multiple requests running into the thousands to work actually on the highway. I thought what would be really helpful for members is to look at actually what are the relevant parts of the New Roads and Streetworks Act and exactly what it is that gives authorities a duty and a power to manage. So I won't go through the entire list, but effectively what you have, so under section 50, that's where you then look at the installation of apparatus in the highway by non-statutory undertakers. So this would be things like private sewer connections. Section 52 is emergency works and the powers and the noticing periods behind that. And then as it moves on through, section 56 is the authority's power to direct the timing of proposed works. So this is where we can say to an undertaker, no, you can't do works at that time. However, that doesn't apply to emergency works. They can be done retrospectively. So effectively, you can turn a utility company who has the legal right to maintain their apparatus and install apparatus into the highway can turn up under their emergency powers and have to tell us within 2 hours, or if it's out of hours, by 10 o'clock the next morning, which obviously causes a lot of frustration when effectively you'll have something happening outside of your house and we don't know about it yet. Moving on through is the general duties of undertakers to cooperate with the authority, keeping it safe, reinstatement, and so on. And then we go into kind of maintaining a register and maintaining a log of exactly what it is they've done. And then finally kind of get to the liability element when things don't go right. Thanks, Sean. So what happens off the back of that? So within the Traffic Management Act of 2004, it gave local authorities the power to put in a permit scheme. The Isle of Wight actually put in a permit scheme in April 2020. So this was basically the Isle of Wight Council saying to every undertaker, this is what we expect of you and this is how we want to manage that network. So it gives us the power to grant, modify, refuse applications for works promoters or statutory undertakers. And then it incorporates elements of the New Roads and Streetworks Act as well as the Traffic Management Act. So the Traffic Management Act changes a section of New Roads and Streetworks Act when operating a permit scheme. So a section 54 notices being replaced by what we know as a PAA, a provisional advance notification. So this is what you will see on major works. So when we say that a utility company gives us 3 months notice, they'll come to us 3 months in advance and say, we propose that we want to do this. That's where the coordination piece starts. It's by no means where it ends, but that's where it starts, is to give everybody enough notification as possible. And at that point is where we start engaging with the utility company or whoever it is in relation to how they're going to deliver it and who they need to tell. There is a slide later on where I'll show you the breakdown of actually how those permits are done, because not all of them come in as major works, obviously, because it's depending on duration. But section 52 is probably the bit to remember is the emergency works. And then noticed under section 57, including immediate emergency works, where the promoter has 2 working hours, as I said, 7 days a week to come to us, but they come to us by 10 o'clock the next morning effectively. If you want to move on to the next slide, Michelle. As I said before, under the permit scheme and under the guidance provided, we have the conditions that we can impose on a utility company. These conditions probably don't give you as much as you think in way of managing utility companies. They're a very defined list of things that we can request of them. The conditions are listed in the presentation. I appreciate there's a lot there, but this is things like limiting time of day, when they can do it, highway occupation dimensions. Is the road to be closed to traffic? Is it not to be closed, but do we expect that a certain level of access is contained? And effectively, what does that road space look like? And then what this links back into, so you have an application come in for multi-way traffic signals, traffic lights. We will then compare that to Chapter 8 for traffic management and see, firstly, is that safe to be in operation? And is that the right thing to be using? So my team that work at Island Roads will go through each application and look at these conditions. And these are not blanket conditions that you can impose across the board. They have to be bespoke depending on the application that comes in. Off the back of this, and kind of, we'll link it back into the publicity for proposed works. The publicity for proposed works is something that we request of utility companies on major works. It's not feasible that you request that for every minor works that's lasting under 3 days in duration, but it is something that you do have the power to ask for. So this would be things like letter drops to affected residents' business frontages. Michelle? Several different types of permit applications can come in, and effectively what you do is you break them down into time frames. So you have minor, standard, major, immediates. So you'll have a major application, so that's where they're requesting to occupy the highway for more than 10 days. At that point is where the PAA that I mentioned earlier comes in. They are supposed to give us 3 months notice to ask for that. Less than 10 days is a standard application, and then so that's between 4 and 10 effectively, and then minor is under 3 days in duration, whereas immediate, they have to tell us 2 hours after they've already started. They do have the right then to come to us and ask for extensions and modifications and amendments. They then have to be agreed by my team, but the variation has to be 2 days before the end or 20% of the permit time, depending on whichever one is longer. But as a highway authority, and it's not just us with the delegated powers as Island Roads in this instance, but across the board, you have times that you have to respond to the utility companies as well. So effectively, on a major application, we have a month, 1 calendar month to say yes or no to the advanced authorization. Then when they actually do apply for it, that's only 10 days in advance. We have 5 days to respond. Standard applications, we have 5 days. Minor applications, we have 2 days to say yes or no. And immediates, we have 2 days to respond to say, yep, thanks for letting us know that you've done that. Seems a bit counterintuitive, really, to say, yep, thanks for letting us know, when, they could have already been finished. So I think, there's a common misconception out there that all of these works are planned well in advance. Frankly, they're not. And these are the response times that we turn around. And it's important to note that thankfully we don't have them. But if we don't respond as a local highway authority or working on behalf of the local highway authority, it's deemed consent. So it's effectively an auto grant situation where the utility has our permission without our permission because we failed to get to it in time. We aim not to have any of those, obviously. Thought it'd be helpful just to take you through on the next slide some of the numbers of applications that actually receive across the island. So these are the 2024 into 2025 numbers. Appreciate that detail is quite small up on that screen, but I'll just run you through some of the highlighted numbers. So between April 24 and April 25, there was actually a total of 15,031 applications to work on the highway. Out of those, permits that were granted to work on the highway, 2,015 of them had a road closure. 1,128 were under 2-way signals, and 495 of them are under multi-way signals. So this is where you have more than one traffic light, more than 2 traffic light heads. Those numbers you can scale it up. You may see a mainland authority, much larger than the Isle of Wight will be up 50, 60,000. But actually for a network of the size that we manage, there's an awful lot of work happening at any one time. And the coordination of that is not only challenging, but actually is probably above the residents' expectations of actually how much work is delivered across the island. And, on top of that, so not only do you have the road closures, the multi-way signals, you then also, part of that operation, you also have all the licenses for skip, scaffolding, hoarding, abnormal loads, and trying to coordinate around that. And as I mentioned earlier, with best intentions, you'll go through and you will grant permission and refuse permission and modify permission, whatever else you may do. And then somebody around the corner will turn up with an emergency works and you find out about it 2 hours after they've started. So you can understand where some of those conflicts then come in. So I mean, the next slide is really how do we make the decisions that we make, hourly, daily, every minute seems like sometimes. We have to rely on the legislation that we have and the powers that we have to be able to do it. As minimal as those powers seem to be, that's what we have to rely on. We use several different systems. There's one called Street Manager. So this is a national system that's brought in by the Department for Transport, where every undertaker, statutory undertaker this is, will apply online effectively for permission to work and for a permit. Highway authorities nationally then manage from that system. So that's where we will have all of our interactions as far as permitting is concerned, where we apply conditions, where our inspections are recorded, where their reinstatements are recorded. And then there's a website, a lot of you will be familiar with it, One.Network. So One.Network is a national platform that effectively takes an extract out of Street Manager, I think it's every 15 minutes. And what that does, it will then show you in a very visual way of exactly what works are happening out on the highway, and you can drill into that. It's a free to use service for the public. You just click into it and it will tell you, yep, this is 2-way signals by Southern Water to respond to a water leak. That's any works that have a permit in place will then be up on there. So again, it won't show you things that haven't yet been put in, but it will show you those advanced authorizations as well. As Island Roads employees, we have our accredited staff. So it's part of this national scheme. So we have our new roads and streetworks accreditations. So this is what gives our staff the accreditation to be able to check a traffic management plan. And all of our staff are trained in permitting to supervisor level to be able to look at an application and see if that traffic management is in line with legislation, is legally compliant with what's required. So what will dictate what's legally required is normally things like visibility lines, traffic volumes. You'll look at actually what the road width is. It's no secret. We have a very restricted network on the island as far as road width is concerned. One of the main things to remember is if you have a HGV route, the minimal running lane is 3.25 meters wide. So if that happens to be a bus route, lots of our roads, by the time you then put a safety zone in next to where you're actually working, to try and maintain 3.25 meters for a big green bus to come past is impossible. So therefore, the default position then is that you have to then close the road to be legally compliant. On top of that, I think it's really important to note, and something that we're really proud of, is the people that work in our office live and work on this island. We were talking earlier, this is part of some of the questions about local knowledge. All of my team live on this island. So when we mention, we put traffic lights, it's probably one of my staff that's also late for work. And there's a real passion in order to keep the network moving. I think that's one of from not always working on the island, from working on mainland too. Coming over here, it's something that's really noticeable, actually, as far as what the local knowledge is amongst the teams. And we have relationships with a lot of councillors and a lot of members in public and different businesses where actually we get a lot of feedback on things that work and don't work. So I think it's important to remember. But moving on to communication. communication that Island Roads commit to do for the Isle of Wight Council as far as these schemes, in total honesty, far outweighs what we can expect of a utility company. So for works that are for us, that we deliver on behalf of the council, so on a daily basis, the current works that are about to take place that have active traffic management or positive traffic management, so this is something that will cause you a delay, there's no way of sugarcoating that, is posted to Twitter. So that's on a daily basis. And this is in addition to what's already on network, on one.network, that's visible for the public to see anyway. On a weekly basis, we have a meeting with Southern Vectors. So what we do with Southern Vectors is we say to them, look, this is the work that we have coming up, in order to give Southern Vectors a chance to be able to reroute or expect delays on that part of that network. Road closures, so temporary traffic regulation orders, as they're known, although they're sealed by the council, what we also do is part of that requirement is that actually we still advertise in the local paper. So the county press is who we use for that advertising. So you will see in the back page of the county press every single week, you will see a whole list of there's the roads that are coming up, and you know, and that's something that legislation has not changed, and will continue. And I know the Department of Transport are having conversations in relation to actually is that hitting the right amount of people, but it's something that's still very much in place. We have our internal communications where we, as Island Roads, sit down with the Isle of Wight Council, and we look at actually what's coming up over the next 6 weeks. So this will be what prompts a lot of the press releases that you will see. So, you know, we're doing the cycle track at the minute. You'll see this press release in relation to that. You know, these kind of big impactful works. So a commitment from us is works that require a road closure, and these are kind of longer term works. So works that are affecting a free route or that kind of thing, is we will do the advanced letter drop. So that's to affected residents and local businesses, local stakeholders. But this will only be to the frontages of those properties. It won't be every single person, obviously, that's impacted. We appreciate that, but it will be to the immediate residents there. And I suppose the final thing that we do actually took place today. We have a weekly programming meeting. So we'll sit down with effectively the departments that put works out on the road from Island Roads with the Isle of Wight Council's team. And we will go through, this is what's happening next week. This is what the look ahead is. Is there any concerns? Is there anything in addition that we can do, need to do? Is there anything, you know, it may very well be that off the back of them we'll be challenged on timings or whatever it may be. And it just gives us an opportunity really just to sense check and look through and make sure that we're coordinated and collaborated. So that's what we do. It's not quite the same for a utility company. Third party is under National Condition Text 11B. The national conditions, as I mentioned earlier, that we can put onto a utility company. We put these on and ask that they comply, obviously. If they don't comply and fail to deliver this, as the highway authority, you can issue a fixed penalty notice. We'll come on to fixed penalty notices at the end of the presentation, and you'll see that actually probably they don't mean as much as what you would think they mean. Just in sheer terms of monetary value. But what you have is, and this is national guidance that's sent out to everyone. I'll read you an extract from it. So it says the application of this condition should be reasonable, proportionate, and agreed with the works promoter, and include the method and timescales required appropriate to the impact of the network. Due to the nature of advanced information, this condition cannot be applied to immediate works and would only apply to minor works when minimum notice periods are not used. So effectively what that's saying is this is not a blanket condition, and it has to be agreed with the works promoter and what they also see as reasonable, not just what we do. So this is where you'll see things like advanced warning boards. So works start here on the 1st of September, they're due to last 2 weeks. This is where the condition comes from as far as can you letter drop affected residents. You'll note though, what this doesn't do is it doesn't put a requirement to advise of a change. So if anybody gets a week into a job and discover that they're actually going to need an extra 2 weeks, there isn't a condition to then go back and rewrite to those residents. But what we will do is we will put a note on and we will contact the utility company and say, can you change the advanced warning signs to extend them? So that's why you will see some of those signs out on the road change, because something's changed and that permit's been extended for whatever reason. We have the power to refuse an extension on a permit. But actually, you need to look at the lesser of the two evils, because what you'll do, if you refuse the extension to the permit, it means that they have to finish early and they're not going to complete what they went there to do. All it means is they're going to put another application in to come back and whatever the required timescale is, and then you have no reason to refuse it as long as there's nobody else in the way. So effectively all you're doing is you give the residents a 2-week break, whereas actually, you have to make that conscious decision. Are you better off to let them continue and take that inconvenience in the short term, as opposed to complete redisruption later on down the line? And it often takes longer to make them stop and then restart. So that kind of covers the conditions that we do. I think what's important, though, for everyone to remember is when we do stakeholder engagement, the stakeholder engagement piece is not a consultation. So when we go out and say this is happening, it's not a consultation saying, can we do this? The authority effectively has had to make that decision already in line with legislation, and the utilities have a legal right to go and work on the highway. What we're asking for as part of that engagement piece is for things that we don't know about. A common example of that is if we're about to close a road in 3 months' time, and we send that out to stakeholders for those stakeholders then engage back, that'll be things like a school fete's happening. That's not happening on the highway, so they wouldn't have told us as the highway authority it's happening. But actually what they do is they pick up the phone and they say, actually, we've got a school fete happening here. And we say, right, okay, thanks very much for letting us know. We'll then plan, see if we can change anything to make that access easier. But it's not a consultation. If we're contacted as Island Roads in relation to utility works that are underway, we'll try and answer the questions as best we can. But if it's a complaint in relation to Southern Water working outside of my house, we will then have to direct that resident to that utility company to say, we've done the legal part of it. If it's something that they're now undertaking or doing outside of your property, there's very little that you could do as a highway authority to manage that unless they're breaching a condition. So it's actually better directed directly towards the utility company. There was a question, and I thought we'd include it in this slide, in relation to Horsebridge Hill. One of the questions is that Island Roads manage the communications to the public and to residents, to affected businesses, stakeholders, and that we have operatives available to immediately respond when there's issues out on site. So I think one of the examples was a blown over barrier that had happened, and it took Captiva, Crown Park, working on their behalf, several hours to respond to that. In order to resource up to be able to deliver that level of service, that we manage those communications and we have operatives available to go and manage third-party works, which isn't currently a requirement. We're around about £250,000 a year to the authority to be able to do that. And you'll find nationally that local authorities don't provide that service for that reason. What you will do is you will commit to taking the call from the resident, having an understanding of what the issue is, and then contacting the undertaker of that work saying, can you go out and fix that? By all means, if my guys are driving past and they see there's a barrier blown over, the expectation is that my team will pull over and they will stand that barrier back up, or they go speak to the operatives on site and say, can you do that? But especially over the weekends, if those calls come into our emergency line, then the process would be to then push them over towards the developer, and we'll make the call and say, could you do this? But there's no guarantee that's going to be in a time frame that residents expect. Moving on from communications, there's another slide in relation to the streetworks permits over the last 5 years. And actually looking at these slides, I think probably the bit that we focus on is actually there's an awful lot of works out there that don't generate complaints. There's an awful lot of work out there that don't generate some of the public interest that actually, things like Horsebridge Hill do. And I know that's an exceptional circumstance because of the traffic sensitivity of that part of the network. But actually during Q1 of 2025, there was 1,944 works that actually took place. out on the network. Horsebridge Hill was one of them. And the slide here, I appreciate you won't be able to see that, but it breaks down permits and immediate urgents that came in to us. This is between August of last year and July projected this year. And actually what you'll notice is the percentages of the immediate urgents and the immediate emergencies that came in. So for someone like Scottish and Southern, 52% of their works came down to us as electricity, came down to us as emergencies. Southern Water, 73% of their works came down to us as emergencies. I think it kind of speaks for itself as far as the challenge of then trying to coordinate those emergency works that you don't have the right to say no to. Moving over, as I promised, I said that I'd put some in about penalties. The fine for working without a permit on the highway is £500. So this is where they don't come to us at all and don't tell us, and we find them out on the network. This happened recently over in Porchfield. The fine's £500. They pay within 28 days, it's £300. The permit conditions that were listed earlier, those 12 conditions, a breach of one of those is £120. Paid within 28 days is £80. You ask somebody to do a £3,000 letter drop, I'll let you do the calculation for yourselves on why we see quite so many FPNs being issued and breaches of condition. And these are not fees that are set by the Isle of Wight Council, these are fees that are set nationally. As I kind of alluded to throughout the presentation, we don't have the teeth that people often think they have. And actually the penalties don't align with actually some of the impact that some of these works have and some of these breaches conditions have. That's the end of the presentation. In fact, obviously we welcome questions.
Thank you very much. As well, that's really, really helpful. Were there any more comments from the team? And Mrs. Love, would you want to add anything at all to that before we go over to questions?
No.
No?
My colleagues from Island Roads did an excellent job putting that together. I realise there's an awful lot of information in there, so the usual caveats are applied. We will circulate this with the minutes. If you have specific questions about any of the data that Jimmy's given, then please do drop us an email, or we can, within one of the committee briefings, if you'd like to go into anything in more detail, we can certainly add that onto the agenda.
Thank you very much. Over to you guys then. Councillor Jarman.
Thank you, Chair. I might as well start off. I'd like to go specifically to Horsebridge Hill, and first of all, to thank you very much for that presentation. I found it remarkably informative. I had no idea at all the scale of what you need to do, or indeed the challenges. So turning to Horsebridge Hill, could you just summarise the process that was followed from when you were first contacted about Horsebridge Hill and made your submission and proposal through to the time when the work on Horsebridge Hill started, and your belief as to whether the legislative and regulatory provisions, which you very clearly outlined here, were followed?
So yeah, so effectively what happened on Horsebridge Hill is the application wasn't made because the outstanding Section 278 agreement needs to be in place. So effectively what happens is in the usual process, the 278 agreement would be signed off. What would then happen is we would then be contacted to say, can we go and work? And that would be the usual 3 months process. That wasn't possible for reasons that my colleagues have outlined previously, as far as, you know, occupation of the highway and a wish to start sooner for occupational conditions. So effectively what happened is we met with Southern Water, Captiva. So we met with Captiva and said to them, what is it that you want to do? And it was a tri-party meeting between us and the Isle of Wight Council and Captiva. And the decision was taken at that time that actually works could start within 2 weeks. That wasn't sufficient time to be able to do the communication that I explained. So although, in answer to your question, not illegal, because actually, as a highway authority, you're quite within your right to be able to say you can start tomorrow if you like. It's certainly not what we would ever aim for as far as expectations for residents are concerned. And actually a lot of work then went in within that 2-week period before those works started to try and get as much communication as went out. And I think as part of the lessons learned process, what we can tell is actually if a process follows as it's supposed to, and those timeframes are achieved, then it works smoothly. I think what went wrong on Horsebridge Hill is because there wasn't sufficient time to be able to follow some of those communication efforts. Actually, that's what caused a lot of the issues that we experienced. So yes, legal. Would it be as everybody wanted? No. But actually, I think what needs to be acknowledged is actually that a lot of work then did go into trying to do that communication. And then there was a level of engagement after the works had started that you also wouldn't usually see. Communications with councillors, there was a weekly meeting that then took place to try and, you can't wind back and you can't stop the works from happening, but a lot of then proactive action was then taken. But yes, in summary, in answer to your question, no, it wasn't as we would have wanted, but it did happen. And by the time that the Section 278 agreement was agreed, it then left that the agreed start date was then going to be 2 weeks' time.
So with the original submission in terms of the planned timescale from Island Road, which I believe was for works to commence in October, what you're saying is that recommendation from Island Roads was overridden by the Isle of Wight Council. And as a consequence of it being overridden by Isle of Wight Council, I'll be very kind, the result is as we saw it.
We would always recommend that the legislation, the target timescales available in the legislation are followed, and that would be the normal recommendation. But there is always, as a local highway authority, the option for the other decisions to be made at a strategic level as to the need of amenity, maybe out width of the highway elements that we have party to. So there will be other factors of public amenity that are required, possibly that might seek that decision.
So just to say thank you, and it's good to understand where the process was changed and why your recommendation wasn't followed. Thank you.
If I could,
I'd like to come in.
yeah. So the reason that we had to plan the works at the time that we did was because there was a condition of occupancy placed upon the construction of those properties to have those properties occupied by the end of June. So Island Roads, the first, obviously, if the 3-month process had been followed, that would have placed the works, it wouldn't have adhered to the occupancy condition, and also it would have placed the works in the peak summer season. So that was immediately then discounted by all parties because we couldn't have that kind of work taking place at the peak summer season. Island Roads then suggested October. The reason that we wanted the works to happen earlier was because Southern Water are coming back. This will happen again. It will happen in January. And had we said for the works to go ahead in October, that would have given 6 months of the Horsebridge Hill one-way system through the winter, which we felt was too much for residents to be able to deal with, particularly in the bad weather and the shorter days, and also wouldn't have adhered to the planning condition that was placed upon it by the council. So we have the highways team working to ensure that the conditions of the occupancy given by the planning decision are adhered to. So that left the timescale that we had, which was for the spring, which allowed greater light. So we were coming into the longer days, and to ensure that both the occupancy and the peak network time were taken into account. So although it was overridden to ensure that another part of the council was able to achieve the objectives that it had set out for the development.
Thank you very much. Councillor
Stewart. Thank you for that. The presentation was extremely helpful. Thank you. Now have my mind buzzing about traffic management, and will have to go away and study it in detail at some stage. What we were looking for, and what I think was agreed, was that we'd have a review, a formal review of what actually happened. So what we've got at the moment is a presentation. Can I just confirm that we will get a review out of this first? That's just a fairly straightforward thing, a proper review, a written review. Because that's my understanding of what was agreed previously at within the minutes of the previous meeting.
So yes, but I think we would need within one of our briefing meetings to understand what you would like within that review. Which parts of it are you asking us to review?
Okay, the idea was, I go back to the last minutes, and I'll come on to the sort of process, because there is no doubt, and I will say it in public, I have repeatedly said it, that the various parties, including Island Roads and yourself and everybody else, have made an extreme effort to try and work it through on what was a very rapid
Councillor Chair,
decision.
I do have the minutes here. If it's helpful, I can read it
That's
out
okay,
for you.
sorry, I'm trying to do
Yes,
two things at once. I'm not very good on this.
It's on Councillor Garrett, and he has a supplementary question that he asked whether officers would go ahead with a full, transparent and candid review. This was confirmed by the Strategic Director of Communities.
Okay, so given that, as long as we've got that agreed, that we will have a formal review, the main purpose of that was to understand two things. First of all, what happened, and secondly, what are the lessons learned, so to see whether they can be applied elsewhere. I've got a variety of things which I will pass on to you later on as to a consideration of what that review might entail. And that may be of some help, but it is the sort of lessons learnt from this. One of the critical lessons, which I think is extremely important, is the fact that councillors who actually have the on the ground information and knowledge were not consulted at all during any of this process until basically it was announced. At that stage, I have to say that I was extremely impressed by Island Roads trying to work as hard as they could to try and listen and then implement some of the suggestions that were coming out of a variety of people. And the process by which we then ended up, I'm glad to say, with a regular committee meeting of all of the interested parties to try and manage the process was helpful. The issue comes back down to the beginning of the process, which meant that the staff of a variety of agencies and organisations were overwhelmed by residents who had serious concerns, because we are talking very major roadworks. We all know that, and I'm not arguing about whether it was appropriate or not. I don't think there was any doubt it was necessary. But it was that impact, and there is a lesson, which is how do we avoid that type of impact again? Because I really don't think that the staff of, say, for instance, Island Roads and the council were geared up for the level of concerns. So some of the things that the department implemented in terms of a central point for collection of concerns and a frequently asked questions within the website were extremely helpful in that process. So those are some of what we would like to see, I think, as lessons learned. And to see how we can avoid this type of process so that fundamentally the public sector doesn't look as if things are just going to happen on top of people. Given all that, some of the things that we did see were extremely useful and also may be applicable to things such as what happened recently at Lushington Hill, and that comes back to a third party, a utility company, and a range of issues whereby basically we saw the entire network in that particular area frozen. And obviously that is not something which any of us want to see, and especially not everybody who works in this sector from day to day. So we come on to directly, are these lessons learned something that can be applied to something, say, closing Horsebridge Hill for several months by Southern Water? And what I'm seeing is, and I've been trying to address Southern Water, I know a number of other people have tried to address Southern Water, we're not getting a very substantial level of engagement. And I have no certainty that the lessons that we've learned from this process at Horsebridge Hill will be applied by Southern Water when they carry out the works. I would refer, for instance, for the speed limits, which Island Roads implemented very quickly on the diversion. And that was an extremely successful mechanism for reducing risk and the impact upon residents. So is there some way in which we can make sure that the lessons learned review, and I don't think we want anything very complicated, we simply want to go, these are some of the things that we can do. I'm aware, before it's mentioned, that there are resource implications for this, and therefore there are certain things which can and cannot happen. But I think as a committee, we'd like to know what is possible and whether that will happen. And given that, is there any way in which we can make sure, and I think you've already alluded to some of these, that Southern Water are at the very least substantially aware of the possible problems that they can cause and the way that they can mitigate those problems so that the residents of the island are at least aware and can manage what is going on. Sorry, I know that's a fairly complicated set of things said there. And as I said, we come back down to the formal review. Can we make sure that that happens reasonably rapidly as a short process, relatively short process, in a way that will help those lessons learned to be pushed out further? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Did anyone want to respond to that at all? I don't know if Mr. Rowland does. I know I've got someone. Oh, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Ashman.
Yeah, so we will obviously work with our colleagues in the council to look at that formal review. I think we've already established that maybe it just goes wider than Island Road service in terms of that end-to-end process. So potentially ties in the planning process and the legal process that gets us to our starting point as well. So I think we're fully up for working through that and supporting where we can. To give Councillor Stewart a little bit of confidence on the upcoming Southern Water works in the area, we've already had meetings with them to talk through the implications and the learning off the back of the current scheme. And we're already aware that there'll be a good transition of the learning points, what we picked up with the Captiva works, and that will transition into the delivery plan for the Southern Water works. And I believe there's very good coordination between the various people that manage the delivery of those aspects. Potentially they will be supporting Southern Water to make sure theirs picks up all the minimum expectations that we've established so far.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ashman. Did you have a supplementary, Councillor Stewart? I've got other members waiting. That was a fairly comprehensive answer. Yeah, questions.
I have said quite enough. I need to say no more at this stage.
Appreciate that. So I've got now Councillor Brodie, and then I've got Councillor Nicholson. Welcome, Councillor Nicholson. I'm stepping in for.
I'm sorry.
Councillor Bester. Not a problem. Not a problem.
Thank you, Chair. I'll probably take a slightly different view to Councillor Stewart, so he doesn't speak for me. I'm less exercised about what happened on Horsebridge Hill, and what I heard from Mr. Wells today was, thank you for that. I've heard it before in the past. I learned very little new from there, but there's no harm in reinforcing my knowledge. I understand what the process is, particularly in that sort of situation. I'm less in exercise, and I don't really feel there's any need for any more officer time or Island Road's time, writing down a review, etc. I've heard everything I need to hear. The bit of there was a problem here. The only bit that really concerns me was the lack of engagement with the chap sat behind me, the local member. If the Isle of Wight Council, particularly their officers, should have been engaged with the local member right from the start, and that happens too often as far as I'm concerned. Local members aren't always involved. I just want us to think about this situation. Let's be realistic. I know lots of keyboard warriors, etc., went berserk about everything at Horsebridge Hill, just as they did the St Mary's Junction, etc. You know, and I'm a Newport councillor, so I think I can speak fairly clearly here. But what are the alternatives? Horsebridge Hill is the main road between Newport and Cowes. It's a major route. Short of using White House Road and the Forest Road, how are you going to get traffic alternatively a lot from between Newport and Cowes and vice versa, short of driving a road right through the middle of Parkhurst Forest? It's just not going to happen. You know, let's get absolutely real about this. And it's about time we had a bit of realism about this. The bottom line is this had to be done to facilitate something that I think is very important, the provision of the housing, whatever it's called now, is it Acorn Farm? I can't remember its name now. 205 affordable homes, which allegedly is a priority of this council. It's certainly my priority, but it is about providing those 205 homes. And the only way that could be done safely was to close the road, because as Mr. Wells pointed out, there has to be a certain amount of clearance for a heavy goods vehicle or a bus, the safety of the people who are working there. Now, that may not be important to a lot of people, but it's important to me. The people who are working there need to be kept safe, and therefore the road needed to be closed. Mrs. Love explained the timing, and I entirely agree with you. Yeah, absolutely, it was common sense not to defer it to October, to have it done in the springtime, so that there wouldn't have been the closure of Horsebridge Hill from pretty much the beginning of October to however long the Southern Water Works take. So, Chair, I'm going to conclude there. You know, I don't feel as exercised. I have a lot of sympathy for the people who are affected by this. You know, I live in Newport. You know, I'm a councillor in Newport. You know, I've had issues in the past that have affected, you know, me as a Newport councillor, but you get on with it. I think this is crying over spilt milk, to be frank. Let's move on. I think the lessons have been learned. The first priority is engage with the local member, Mrs. Love and Mr. Rowlands, who are on there, you know, are listening to this. I hope they just make sure they do that before they agree anything with Island Roads and statutory undertakers or developers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bro. Appreciate those comments. I don't think that requires a response from anyone here, does it? Just taken as read. Thank you. So, Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to explore whether we've got on the agenda Horsebridge Hill, but whether it might be symptomatic of more issues below the surface. And the reason I ask that is because some years ago, under another administration, I discovered that the works programme for the year had not been agreed, even though the time had passed. But not only that, but the works programme for the previous year hadn't been approved. And the implications were that the contractor either had to take a chance and under the contract risk being fined, or the works just didn't get done. And the reason I found out was because it affected a particularly bad stretch of road in my ward. But I'd like to ask if there are other issues like the works programme. Is the current work programme still lacking?
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. Yeah, I think you are correct. There has been challenges getting programmes and delivery plans agreed over previous years. and that has been a situation for multiple years. However, there are some very positive things being done at the moment in terms of the engagement that we're having with the Isle of Wight Council to address those. We're working with external central government body who is pulling together an improved way of delivering the PFI, and we're flashing these things through so that both parties to the PFI delivery are delivering what is needed to ensure these things are happening efficiently, and it maximises our potential to communicate these things in advance and take away some of the historic issues that we have seen. So I would note that the Acorn Farm development wouldn't have been part of our annual programme. That would have still caught us a little bit left field with the short notice.
As a contractor myself, I know how frustrating it is if you're trying to carry out work and you're asking for decisions and instructions, and those decisions and instructions are not forthcoming. So that's what I'm asking. Are we clear on that? Not only that, but as a council, we know that we're shallow on resources, and we tend to put people into positions for which they don't have the necessary competencies. And to me, a PFI contract should be managed by a team of civil engineers, experienced civil engineers. And I think at one time we put a head of planning to manage it, and you know, it's like putting somebody from Parks and Gardens to oversee the floating bridge. But I'd just like some assurance that you don't have frustrations on that front.
So obviously it falls within my service area. So I'm the Service Director of Highways and Community Protection. I've only been here for 18 months. And prior to working here, I worked in Portsmouth, and I worked for 7 years on the PFI contract with Colas and Ensign and Portsmouth City Council. So my greatest area of expertise, while I've done nearly 20 years in transport, is PFI contractual management. That's what I do, and that's what I oversee. And as my colleague Steve said, we are going through a period of change. We are committed to ensuring that the decisions that need to be made and the communication that needs to be had is had. We're working with the National Infrastructure and Strategic Transformation Authority to go through that over the next 9 months. And we have made what I hope is some really positive strides and some really good progress to ensure that the service delivery for the residents of the island stays at the level that they expect. So we can provide further information, but I may not be a civil engineer, but I certainly have sufficient experience in managing PFI contracts to feel confident within the role.
Just to come back, Chairman, well, the proof will be in the pudding. So when Southern Water come to, we'll expect perfect communication. I wasn't included in anything, and I'm neighbouring ward councillor. So we'll expect to see better communication, better timing, better planning. There were some really good things that happened. So I was impressed that that defects in the alternative route along White House Road were remedied before the closures. So there was some positive thinking on it, but I think that we all agree that there was a lot more that could have been done. But thank you very much for your assurances.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, thank you for your verbal description of the process that you went through, the thinking behind it. And as you say, it was there to protect the residents, really, having to be diverted in the winter and so on and so forth. But I have one question, and Councillor Brodie alluded to it. The drive to get these houses occupied, where did that drive come from?
There was a condition placed upon it from the planning committee to have occupancy by the end of the summer. I don't know anything further than that because that isn't within my remit, but that was the part of the edit that we worked to, was that those houses needed to have a level of occupancy by the summer. And in order to achieve that, then obviously the junction had to be constructed. I think if you need further information, I can certainly go back to my colleagues in
I'm going to
planning.
invite Councillor
that's
Brodie
okay.
actually to come in. If that's, I think
Yeah,
you can
I
help
mean, I
us
may
as
be able
well.
to help, you know, it's, I mean, all of the homes have been bought by Sovereign Network Group Housing Association, who I think out of their own resources, I don't think they're funded by the Housing Corporation or whatever it's called these days, but they were very clear, as I understand it, and it was made clear of planning at the time, you know, that the properties had to be in place. I think originally it was by the end of March, but I think the contract probably ended up being at the end of June. So it was probably driven by the Housing
planning
Association.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to, if any more members want to ask a question, I've got Councillor Garrett who'd like to ask a question. Councillor Jarman. No, giving way to you.
We'll try. We've heard several remarks about communications, and I uphold what Councillor Brodie said about communication with the ward councillor, and indeed Councillor Nicholson as well. It's important we don't forget about the communication with the residents of the island, though, within that equation. And I believe we could have significantly de-escalated a lot of those keyboard warriors, I'll borrow a phrase here, had we simply gone out to them and made a very simple statement as a council saying, we've had a proposal to do these works from Island Roads in October. We're going to override that as the Highways Authority within Isle of Wight Council. We're going to start it in 2 weeks' time so that we can comply with the planning conditions, do the work in the summer, and deliver 205 affordable homes to this island. Full stop. Wouldn't that have been a remarkably simple statement to make as an authority? And I believe all of that rhetoric which had taken place in between, and probably a great deal of the negativity that ensued, could have been swept aside in one simple statement from the authority. So please, when we're talking about communications, think about the residents as well, because they were the ones queuing along that road at the time. They were the ones who were sitting there at their keyboards on Facebook and on the White and everywhere else, making those endless diatribes of problems. And a very simple statement, I think, could have de-escalated that very quickly. So just if we take a lesson, maybe I'd suggest that. Thank you.
Yeah, that's very helpful, Councillor Jarman. I think that's noted by the.
Yeah, absolutely. It was included within the frequently asked questions and within the press release, but yeah, absolutely noted. If we need to encapsulate it into one sentence, something like that, then that's what we could do.
Thank you. Now going to invite Councillor Garrett to ask a question or make a comment, ask a question, whatever you'd like to do.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's to just ask a question, but if I can sort of stretch things a little around that.
But it gives some context to your question.
Yeah, I will contextualise my question. I am the chap sat behind Councillor Brodie, as he referred to me, and absolutely the local member, and the local member who welcomes the development on that site of social housing, as I said, at planning committee when it was first put there. Bit of context, Mr. Rowland on one of our first calls did concede, and it was gracious of him to say that it had been, I won't say wrong, but something that should have been done in a different way in terms of engagement with the local members. Obviously, I am the local member for that site, but Councillor Lever, Councillor Stewart, Councillor Nicholson, immediately local members because of the diversion route, and then those other members to the north, all of whom I was trying to engage with to get some action on this way before we got to this point. Repeated emails to Captiva as well to stimulate them and discussions on site with them and things like that. I think if there is a lesson that is learned is to anticipate the level of communication necessary to explain what is happening and why, so that people have everything straight away. I think the biggest problem there was there was no anticipation. Nobody would own the communications for a while. The council stepped in and set up a web page, set up a dedicated email address, all of those sorts of things. From a PR perspective, and somebody who worked in PR for 25 years, all of these things I would say needed to have been in place straight away. I would really welcome what Councillor Stewart was saying about reminding the committee that it resolved that it wanted a full and candid and transparent review. I think that is still needed to capture lessons learned. I don't want that to be something that consumes highways colleagues, and indeed, I would say something that could be led by the communications team, who actually were managing much of what was happening through there. They could capture much of the lessons learned. There is a particular question, though, that I have. Both Mr. Ashman and Ms. Love have referred to what's forthcoming. We know that there are discussions between Island Roads and Southern Water. Southern Water have confirmed that to us as well. What is so, why is it not possible for local members at the very least to be involved in those discussions at this moment in time? Is part of that question. And given what Ms. Love was saying about not having 6 months of one-way closure and diversion, can it now be confirmed that that is intended to happen again, despite many calls for people who are saying we should first look at two-way under lights, bearing in mind the safety concerns of putting a lot of traffic on unlit roads around that one-way diversion. Having travelled it once, twice, and 3 times in every day, 7 days a week at time for some of that period, I saw non-vehicular traffic on that route that in the gloom of winter, in the shorter hours of daylight in the winter, would cause me significant concern about sending a lot of traffic around that route again. Personally, I think we should be very, very seriously thinking that it should be two-way under lights to at least start with. So to sum up, what is it about the discussions between Island Roads and Southern Water that is not allowing local members to already be part of those considerations? And is it now to be confirmed that there will be a one-way closure and diversion in the same way as we had for the junction build for the Southern Water works on Horsebridge Hill?
Thank you for that very helpful explanation of your questions, Councillor Garrett. Who would like to kick off there? Mr. Ashman.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Garrett. There is absolutely no reason why you can't be involved in this process. Where we are at is that Southern Water gave us advance notification. So my colleague Jimmy Wells here has told you it's a 3-month notice process, and they're talking about works that will commence in January. We have jumped in and had some early dialogue with them. And what I'm happy to do is to commit to some councillor briefings led by Southern Water. So I'm not sure I can commit on their behalf, but I'll do my best. But they have already been told the importance of getting this right. So I envisage that during September, October, we'll be in a place where they have refined their delivery details to a level that allows them to advise if they do have to have closures or whether they can do it under traffic lights, etc., etc. I believe that is the appropriate point to then have dialogue. As Councillor Brodie clearly reminded us, the safety of the guys on the ground needs to be one of our high priorities. And if that dictates that a closure is needed, then it would be very difficult for anybody to step in and compromise that. So I'm happy to make that commitment, which I will give to my colleague here fairly soon after this meeting, to organise the relevant key personnel from Southern Water to attend a councillor briefing at the appropriate time in September/October.
No, Councillor. Just going to go back to Councillor Garrett. This is the second part of your question regarding the specification of, has there been a decision made on that? Is that what you're asking, really?
Yeah, yes.
And how?
Ms. Love alluded to that it would. I took it from what she was saying that it had already been decided that we were to experience yet again a one-way closure and diversion.
I'll take the first part, and then I know I can see my colleagues. So as Steve said, Mr. Ashman, we will ensure that there is definitely dialogue, and I guess the final decision would be made once we've seen the final works programme from Southern Water. What I would counsel at this point is that if you do make the recommendation that you would like to see two-way traffic lights instead of what we implemented, it goes against the recommendation because two-way traffic lights will cause unmanaged disruption. So the purpose for the one-way system and the two-way lights was to ensure that everybody got a clear journey in at least one direction, that there was you didn't have to turn across moving traffic too often because you're turning left, obviously, as you start the diversion and then continuing to do that. So you turn left to start the diversion in Newport. It meant that the journey times to the hospital and the prison were the impact upon their journey times was as minimal as it could be, because obviously coming from Cowes to Newport, that was your clear route, and then the diversion started afterwards. The emergency services would definitely have an opinion about implementing two-way lights. They did when this was put in place, because the Coast Guard have their helicopter landing pad at the county showground. So if they were impacted by standstill traffic that you would have queuing backwards and forwards to go through the two-way lights, that's obviously going to be hugely detrimental to their response times. So I think that, our recommendation, and I'm sure my colleagues will step in a minute, would be that we would not recommend that. So, but I will obviously.
It really is to echo what Michelle said, from our experience of this location and Newport and, the island. And it was, I think we had this conversation during the Horsebridge Hill works. Would it be possible to deliver this under two-way signals? In that case, yes, in certain sections, it would have been possible to deliver under two-way traffic signals. As Michelle's already kind of confirmed, the problem is, as a highway authority and as us working on behalf of the highway authority, our job, and I mentioned it in my presentation, of the traffic manager within the authority is to try and ensure movement of traffic. We've seen since Horsebridge Hill finished, a few days after, in fact, there was a Southern Water emergency on Staplers Road. So effectively a mirror image of Horsebridge Hill. The traffic from Staplers Road was back past the county showground towards Cowes. There is no way, in our professional opinion from years of experience, that we can tell you what impact signals would have. The idea behind the one-way system, as Michelle pointed out, was yes, we all acknowledge it had an impact. Of course it did. But actually it provided somewhat of a regular journey time. That journey time was disputed, and I know it was. Some say it's 15 minutes, some say it was an hour. If it was a 15, 16-minute delay, it gives members of the public the opportunity to plan for a 20-minute delay in getting to Cowes. Some may not find that acceptable, but what I cannot guarantee, and none of my colleagues here, I speak on behalf of all of us of this, is what signals would cause. You could have a 2-hour delay. You simply wouldn't know. So our recommendation as Island Roads would be that a one-way system was put back in. Of course, we will speak with Southern Water, and we have done, and we'll continue to, and Steve will hand over his commitment shortly. In relation to the additional measures that were then put in place, so things like the speed limit reduction, of course, we will have those conversations with Southern Water, we can put those in, and they're a fairly swift process that we can get in place. They are engaging with us, and we will continue to engage, and we have relationships with the other undertakers that work across the islands, and actually the subcontractors that deliver some of these works with Captiva. So we will take the lessons learned from that. We see the traffic management plan. Captiva were very generous in they were very open and didn't have to engage with us probably to the level that they did, and took on quite a lot of cost, to be honest, to them to deliver some of the things that they did over and above what we should have or we could have asked them to do. So Southern Water are showing that same commitment so far. We will have a conversation with them. I don't believe that signals would be best to be used. However, let's have those conversations. We can bring you into those conversations so you can sit and, listen, talk that through. But yeah, I don't want to sit here today and make a commitment that it will be signals, because the current plan is that we will replicate the one-way system, and that's in place from the end of January next year to the end of March.
Thank you very much. I've got some comments myself, but do you have one more question?
It's observations, Chairman, if I may. I don't really want an answer to it, but it was good to see that buses were allowed to travel contra the one-way system. But observing that there was capacity, say, for heavy goods vehicles as well, and that might be a consideration, because it would take away one of the concerns from the diversionary route, which was the amount of heavy goods vehicles. That was one thing. The second one, Chairman, if I may, that when the new mains was laid up through my ward in Northwood, I was party to every meeting, and we had a very constructive relationship, and some constructive considerations were made that lessened the impact on the road user. So I would advocate, including the ward councillor at workshop level. The only thing that went wrong with that was at the end, the final reinstatement, as everybody who ever travelled to Cowes or from Cowes to Newport knew, was abysmal, and it didn't meet the statutory standards for road surface finish. Now, I know that because I was party to those meetings where that was stated, but Southern Water refused to accept that, and I believe the Highways Authority refused to or neglected to enforce that. So we were left with Island Roads kindly having to pick up the tab and rectify those defective works several years later, and in fact they did it last year.
Thank you. Mr. Chan, would you like to come in there?
Yeah, sorry, and thank you, Chair and committee. Obviously, I wasn't introduced earlier. Just I'm on the periphery of this in my role, but I just wanted to address a couple of the pieces that have been mentioned. This is development scheme that has led to the situation and roadworks being undertaken. We're engaging with colleagues in planning and developers going forwards to ensure that their considerations to transport impacts are taken into account. So through myself and my colleague Kaylee, going forwards, we'll be having regular discussions with development control, with planning colleagues, so that we're making sure that these sort of implications are given the heads up should they be necessary. The other thing that's worth mentioning is, and quite well as Councillor Nicholson pointed out, was the bus services were permitted to go through in either direction. I think that benefited the overall impacts of this. It reduced them to a certain degree, and is a real, again, as Councillor Brady pointed out earlier, we're very much focused on car usage, where in actual fact, in this instance, we're promoting the use of public transport and thereby reducing congestion if people are using that modes, especially on that short journey between Newport and Cowes, or vice versa, or to St Mary's Hospital and so forth. So, I think those considerations going forwards will be great to include within roadworks here and other locations as well.
Chandra. So I've got a few comments myself. Oh,
Sorry, you're getting eventually. Just a remark that during the Horsebridge Hill works, a number of my residents who work in Cowes pulled their bike along the cycle path because it was open all the way through. So, I mean, that was advantage. But just a quick thing, Chair, if you don't mind, and it's just a slight adjunct to everything we've been discussing. We're talking about roadworks management. Can I just ask Mr. Wells, we've been talking largely about road closures. I mean, something's come to my attention recently, which involves not a road closure, but a minor road with significant works by SGN outside a special school, where a significant number of Southern Vectors buses arrive on a regular basis. These works are going to continue till the end of September. This minor road, off Staplers Road, School Lane, has been reverted to one way, and there are a lot of parking restrictions, etc., down there. Where I was away early August when this began, when I came back, I learned about it. I contacted Children's Services at County Hall, particularly regarding what was going to happen with the buses and the impact it would have on my residents, and they knew nothing about it. The school knew nothing about it. Children's Services knew nothing about it. Can you explain to me, in that situation, what would be the communications that Island Roads would be involved in terms of that sort of works? Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So utility works. So what we would do in those situations is the condition that I mentioned earlier. So you'd put the condition on the utility company to liaise with affected stakeholders. So that would be properties, as in residential properties, schools, public services, whatever it may be, to say that's coming in. As far as the one-way system that's put in, it then reverts also to the TTRO road closure process that I mentioned. So it will be advertised in the local press. It will be on one dot network to show that. So that's the communication method that would be used for those kind of things. Southern vectors are also part of that stakeholder engagement. So if it's Southern vectors that are being affected, they would know because would have been told through the weekly engagement that we have with them, for them to be able to plan accordingly. So even though it may be a minor road, if Southern vectors have a service on there and it's something like a one-way system put in place that requires an order, there will be advance notification of that. Where they won't be told is when you have something on a minor road that's 3-4 days in duration. That will come as a surprise to them.
Chair, I mean, it just surprised me. I mean, this is long-term works, 2 months. I mean, if you went down School Lane, half of it's dug up at the moment, doing massive holes, etc. It's significant work, but the school knew nothing about it. Children's Services education staff knew nothing about it. Of course, this is happening initially in the school summer holidays when most of the people aren't around at work, and then it's going to run past the start of the autumn term, and it's going to have massive implications, but nobody seems to have a plan in place. I mean, Mr. Chandler's knows something about this, I guess, if you've been reading your emails recently, as will Mrs. Love and Mr. Rowlands. But I just was inquiring from your point of view. Thank you, Jimmy. Thanks.
Just to add to that, and thanks, Councillor Brody, for making that observation on those roles. I've had an update from Children's Services. It seems that the head teacher has spoken to Southern Gas Networks, and they feel that the works will be complete by the time the children return to school on the 1st September, which might be a bit of a surprise. But a colleague of Mr. Wells's is copied into that correspondence, and we're just waiting on the confirmation of that. So they will pick that up with Southern Gas Networks, and hopefully it'll be taken into account. But either way, due consideration will need to be made to enable that drop off and pick up in that location.
Thank you everybody for your really helpful questions and comments. I think we've got a good sense of what happened, why it happened, and what lessons we have learned from it. As we said, not all lessons have been in a negative. You know, personally, I think the having the regular bus route was brilliant. I used the buses regularly to Cowes, and the one time I forgot to use the bus and I was in my car, I really wished I wasn't sat round in the traffic and I got on the bus instead. So that was actually a success. And also having the constant access for the emergency services and people getting to hospital appointments. As you know, it can be quite difficult getting a hospital appointment in the first place, so you certainly don't want to miss it. So I think that was a good lesson learned. I think the other thing was the weekly meetings that we ended up having. I thought that was really good. I learned a lot from the ones I attended. We had many stakeholders on those weekly Teams meetings, and I think everyone found it beneficial. So if that's another lesson learned, then that's great. The other thing was we haven't really mentioned about the impact on local businesses and being able to do as much communication with them beforehand, and even maybe give them a helping hand in as much as we can do to say they're still open, for instance, along those routes, even just with some social media stuff. I know we don't have a big team to be able to do that, but I think more preparation people have, so more time they have, they can prepare. So that for me that was really really important. It'd been interesting to know actually if Southern Vector's numbers users went up during that period of time. I don't know if we've got that information. That would be quite interesting. But Councillor, when you mentioned Parkhurst Forest, the road going through a previous officer called Love, Mr. Stuart Love. Actually, I remember emailing him in April 2010 because there was a news article about a road going through Parkhurst Forest. I was like, terrible. Turns out it was April 1st. So there we go. I got done really well, good and proper then. So no, we don't want a road through Parkhurst Forest at all. So I mean, actually, like Councillor Brodie, I don't think any review or any written review that we're going to have needs to be terribly heavy. And I think Councillor Stewart said the same as well. So maybe just a compilation of the lessons learned, and if there's any learning that can be attributed to other upcoming roadworks or even roadworks that come out of the blue. Remember what went well, what didn't go well. I think it all comes down to communication, doesn't it, really? And it's not always able to be able to communicate, given some of the emergency situations that come up with the utilities. I was particularly surprised about the amount of emergency roadworks that do come forward, and you do wonder how many of them could have been planned. But there we go. We'll never know, I guess. And just politically, I'd be really interested to know if that used to happen before they were privatised. I guess that data is probably well hidden, isn't it? So I think you've got a steer from the committee. If we can just, collate the lessons learnt, good, bad, and indifferent, side of A4, I think it has to be much more than that. And then if that can be circulated with the committee, and if there's anything that we feel has been missed off, we can, do a collation on that. Would that be happy? Then perhaps we can just bring it back on its committee just to ratify it. If would that be acceptable to everybody? Yep. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for coming and giving up your evenings. It's been really, really helpful. I couldn't read everything, all the detail on there, Mr. Wells, but I mean, we'll have the slides so I can review them later. Yeah. And I've got my different glasses on. So that'd be good. But so thank you for your time. And I hope the comments from the committee and local member have been helpful to you. We all want to work together, and the fact that we're going to have people in over 200 new homes, I think we have to remember that. Just keep the eye on the prize, and we're very, very fortunate we've got this come forward on the island. So thank you very much. We'll carry on. You can just sort of disappear at your leisure. We're now sticking with transport. We're actually going on to our decisions now. The transport for South East transport strategy. Mr. Charlie, you're going to give us an overview of this. We're all familiar with the document. I think there will be some comments and questions coming from the committee, but we do understand that this covers a very large area and it's not necessarily our Isle of Wight transport strategy. So over to you.
So, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, committee. Effectively, this follows on from the previous committee where we were looking at the draft island transport plan, and this sets it within the regional framework where Transport for South East are looking to update what is their existing strategy to reflect the changes that have happened since it was published, and obviously the changes in priority. What you will see within the document is it does nicely align with what we've set out within our draft island transport plan. So you will see, you should be able to see the relation between the two. But as Councillor Jones-Evans has mentioned, it covers a far wider area, so therefore you don't get the granularity that you would for our own island transport plan. Therefore, it doesn't seek to address some of the issues that we have highlighted. But I think when we met last at committee, we discussed the issue of cross-solent transport, and that is very much cited within the strategy because this is where we're seeing those sort of solutions in future coming from either this level or as the potential mayoral combined authority level as well, because it affects both sides of the water. So therefore, they're better placed to put it into the strategic position to fight the cause as to why it's absolutely necessary, and to get the recognition that those routes are a part of the key network across the southeast, not just a local issue for the island alone. It's something that sets it out across there as well. But it's a good way in which we can, through Transport for Southeast and others, get the ear of government and also those who hold the funds in the future, Treasury and so forth, to make the case to draw down additional funding to get that economic growth and everything else that we need to go forwards. And certainly something which is vital for the island is that economic growth and that prosperity in the future. And so again, you will see a lot of the commonality between our draft local document, the Island Transport Plan, and the transport strategy for the southeast as well. I don't think there's much more to say here other than we're seeking your approval of the draft so that when Councillor Fuller goes back as the representative at the Partnership Board, is able then to confirm our approval at the Partnership Board in October alongside the other constituent members.
Thank you, Mr. Chandler. I've just got a quite general question. How can we as a committee, are we able to alter any of the wording in here or any of the content? Or is it really, it is what it is?
Yeah,
And it's approve or not approve?
Yeah, it's the difficulty is they've been through a formal consultation process in which they've even set up an engagement event at Ryde. So you can imagine across that large geographic area, doing so has been quite a task for them. And so they have been mindful to reach the island and also give that opportunity as well. Is the problem is, again, it's just very often there's so many parts of the strategy, so many policies being developed at the time that it's difficult to, respond as quickly as liked within those consultations. But they did do a very detailed consultation, and those have been considered, and responses to those that have come through. And we did have representation. My colleague Lewis Campbell attended the event, where it's very much just setting out what the strategies had in general and also the implications for the island. But we don't, where this aligns with the ideals for the Island Transport Plan, there was nothing in there that we felt that was necessary for the officers to respond. But at this stage, it's a bit late in the process to make substantial changes. But I can always raise anything should we need to.
Thank you. I'm just going to raise one particular issue before I go over to the committee. I have made notes on several pages, but one thing that stuck out for me was in our papers. It's page 1, 2, 3. It's page 3 of the updated maps and diagrams. We've got a page called resilience priorities. We've got resilience priorities. We've got there's the Hayling Island bridge access. There's the Shakespeare Cliff resilience, Canterbury rail cord, all sorts of things like that. The Thames crossing in Kent. For the island, we don't have our ferries as a resilience issue at all. All we've got there, we've got a drawing of the sea, which means it's coastal erosion, flooding risk. Yet for an isolated island community, our ferries are our lifeline, and that is our resilience. That is our resilience issue, I would say, actually, probably the main one. So I don't understand. Maybe there's a reason. Maybe I've misunderstood what resilience means with this part of this. But to me, that's a big red flag that they're not really understanding our island issues. And I would be really reluctant to approve a plan that I feel doesn't reflect what our island issues are. And we're in a different system now. It's a committee, and you're asking all of us to not you, but Transport Southeast are asking us to approve this, and we will be having our own transport plan coming forward. So it's that particular issue that's really raised a massive red flag for me.
Yeah, no, I completely understand. In the Cross-Solent transport links are set out within the proposals for the Solent within the draft transport strategy, and transport connectivity rather than resilience, on the basis that resilience was in regards to a lot to do with the changing climate, and what was a 100-year, one of the 100-year flooding impact that would impact the network in the strategic point, is now more frequent to the point in which it can be much quicker than that. So my understanding is the resilience looks at, given the threats of changing sea levels, given the likelihood of increased flooding and potential increased erosion, those are the sort of schemes in which they're trying to build the resilience in to protect those. So on the island, very much it should be highlighting the coastal areas. So we've got those impacts potentially at Ventnor, we've got those impacts potentially at Bembridge and other coastal areas as well. So they should be highlighting those areas. But when it comes to the cross-island connectivity, it highlights the potential of improvements to that network within the document, but under a different category, with suggestions to make either additional routes, increased frequency, or others as well. Because whilst it does highlight, there has been improvements, certainly in pre-pandemic and in relationships with the cross-Solent ferry operators, there are still things that need to be addressed, and certainly this does look to make the case to address those cross-Solent connectivity issues.
Thank you for that. So really, we're looking at this is more like more about sustainability, really, and risk. So I mean, so it would be really helpful if we actually had a, rather than coastal erosion, because landslips isn't necessarily coastal erosion, is it? And they cause the flooding issues, but actually that is another issue which we are dealing with, a live issue. That this is not necessarily. We have a landslip forum. It's separate from the coastal erosion. So I'm going to bring. Did you want to come in a bit? Okay, thank you. So I think, yeah, it's hard for us because we live this experience really. It's hard for us, isn't it? But the other thing that didn't give me much hope, well, not hope, but sort of confidence, I guess, was on page 68, and that's in the first appendix. Was actually they've just missed off a whole ferry route off Yarmouth. You know, it's on page 68, page 6 of 57, the first appendix, and I think if they've missed off one of our ferry routes to Yarmouth to the New Forest, again, it's doesn't give you much confidence, doesn't it? It's basic stuff. It's all very basic. But I guess if you're working across such a big area like that, it's not really neither here nor there. So you see how it's hard for us to go, yes, we approve this plan. Well, it's hard for me to do that. But I guess I'll let you answer that. But I think what does give me comfort in a way, and maybe Councillor Jordan can come in a second, because I'm not speaking in my my comfort zone, if you want, and Councillor Jordan's done it for the last 4 years, is that I understand, and he's doing it now on behalf of us as leader, is when we get into if we do get to a combined mayoral authority, then the transport will be a devolved power down to that area, and I'm hoping then we can have more local conversations where we can pick these things up. So there's a question about that. I hope Councillor could come in afterwards, but I guess my other question is, what happens if we don't approve it?
Yeah, no, completely understand. I believe that one has already been picked up as identified in subject to that draft that's been circulated. It's been identified that there's a missing ferry route there and will be included. But again, you're right. It's because it's such a high level, strategic level strategy that when it comes down to the details and some of the issues that we live and breathe at local level are sometimes missed, or they're not highlighted, that's because of the wider impacts. And this is where you're dealing with the granular level within the island transport plan. We've then got the transport for South East. We've got Solent transport, which at the moment runs in between the two. They say the combined authority will take over the lead for the transport strategy and policy going forwards. And that is where we will need to ensure we've got ongoing engagement to ensure that the local issues are very much front and centre of any consideration, certainly for the island. But really, we align with many of the issues that are across the wider area. So therefore, anything that is highlighted here is replicated elsewhere. But certainly we'll be making sure that local representation. This is why representation at the partnership board, senior officer involvement, and so on and so forth is crucial for being involved with bodies such as Transport for South East. And also it will be interesting to see how the combined authority still works, because whilst they'll be setting the policy and strategy, the unitary authority will still be responsible for the delivery of those schemes. So therefore, there's got to be close communications between, therefore engagement is going to be critical going forwards now and then in the future as well.
Councillor Jordan, are you able to, do you want to come in at all, or you think it's all covered?
No, thank you, Chair. No, I guess the thing to remember is this. This document started out, I don't know, 6 years ago. It's about 6 years ago, and there's been lots of changes along the way. And things have changed on the island. Military Road's a good example that this was way down the road, this document, before the Military Road became quite the concern that is now, although we knew it was coming for many years. I do have my concerns about Transport for the South East at the high strategic level. When you look at the map, we are a little cog down the bottom here, and over here we've got airports and ports and motorways, and which are vital for the southeast, but they're not terribly vital for us as an island. So for me, the more important part is our own transport plan. And I just wonder now, the other change since this was started is potential devolution. And if that commences, one of the first powers that are going to come across together with funding will be on transport, things like strategic routes and stuff like that. And I wonder if this, it's beginning to sound to me and bear in mind, in a short number of years, all of the areas are going to be devolved. So all of those areas on that map for the southeast and Transport southeast will have devolution deals, each with a mayor, each with funding, each with and I just wonder, at one point, Transport for southeast, I haven't been for a while, Stuart, and you might tell me if they dropped this idea, but they were going to apply for a devolution deal themselves, which seemed pretty odd, and they were consulting on it at one time. Which just seemed remarkable. Just seems to me that there's going to be a collision here at some point, in terms of government will be saying, but we're giving money down to devolved areas and mayors to take care of their strategic transport requirements. And here we have Transport for the Southeast probably going to ask for similar powers and similar funding. I don't know. Just maybe you can help further on that, Stuart.
Yeah, of course. And I neglected to address the other question: what's the impact of not being in it? So, yeah, devolution is certainly going to make a change in relationship that we will have with Transport for South East. Effectively, that relationship will switch to the combined authority, because they're going to be responsible for policy and strategy. Therefore, the island itself and the unitary will no longer be, party to those direct discussions, but will still be involved, because obviously we've got to deliver on whatever's agreed, certainly on the combined authority. But what it does bring is the opportunity to make the case for the southeast. And you would have seen for Transport for the north and others areas as well, where there's no question that there is this whole previous levelling up agenda, where there's that imbalance between the north and the south, and the economic growth and development. But because the southeast is so important, and the infrastructure schemes need to be funded to make it work and make sense, it only really works the narrative if we're all in it together. So therefore, the southeast making a combined representation to government and saying, actually, we do need this money. Don't neglect us. I know we're just outside London, but we don't benefit in the same way as the funding streams do elsewhere. So therefore, we do still need to have that funding. It's unlikely, we're yet to see exactly how Transport Southeast will operate in a devolved environment. However, the indications are that they will still exist as a bit of a centre of excellence where they can highlight and work with us, train our staff, and also offer opportunities so that we can then merge our skill sets between to ensure that we're building the best practice, best quality when it comes to transport strategy development and infrastructure works. So this is the likely push going forwards. So the funding is, you're saying that they asked for devolved powers. That is unlikely to be the case now because of the arrangement, especially being that East and West Sussex are under devolution fast track as well, which are the home to Transport for South East at the moment anyway. And so it wouldn't make sense that they sort those powers alongside the devolved arrangement. So therefore that's been set aside whilst they set out their new relationship. But this gives us a good argument in the interim to sort of say this is what we need for the South East and therefore the benefits to the island thereafter.
Sure. Is it just one other thing on this? If we were to take a view on this tonight, would it be a bit like The Mouse That Roared? If you, for those of you who remember the film, The Mouse That Roared, where the very small authority, if we were to decide that we were unhappy with that, this would just go straight ahead anyway, wouldn't it?
We're yet to see where we are with this. Things have moved politically since the last time the strategy was developed. And we know that there is different governance in areas like Kent who have a big say because they're a large area within the southeast. So we're waiting to see how that plays. But, you know, to be quite honest, aligned with TfSE, it has brought additional funding. It has brought us upskilled our, you know, approaches to different schemes. And also we've done well when we've partnered up with our neighbouring authorities. Solent Transport's a good example of that, and the FTZ project, but also transforming cities, the ride interchange improvements there. It's good to be aligned with our neighbouring authorities and ideally beyond that as well, because we can be a part of a larger voice. It's a bit like that mouse situation where in actual fact, whilst our lone voice might not be heard, the collective voice can be heard. And we sometimes, and again, given the unique transport opportunities the island brings, we benefit from that. And so therefore we sometimes, and you know, like with ride interchange, we benefited from a larger slice of the cake than we probably should have been for the size of our population and usual demographics. So I think we did well there, and I think we should do well going forwards, especially if we keep pushing our unique challenges as well as opportunities, because you know, things like the cross Solent connections and all of that, you can't be replicated elsewhere. So we're pretty unique. So when they set out there, this is Transport South East, they're going to be very different from Transport for North and others because they don't have those same sort of unique challenges. So therefore it makes them unique, and by in turn, they want to keep us on board. So they want to help us. Yeah.
That's really helpful, and thank you. Thank you for. I'll bring Councillor Jarman in a second. So from what I'm hearing, we probably benefit more from being within it and being part of it, and to make our case continually rather than not being part of it. So, and we have had some, you know, some wins out of it. And I think actually the ride interchange. Did we all get a reward, for that? I think didn't we
also
also
have some clarity on that? The FTZ
Yeah.
wasn't TfSE, was it?
No, the FTZ and the Transforming Cities were not within TfSE, but it built the narrative. It's a bit like
Oh, 'cause it's
you know,
in it's
yeah,
never
it's
mentioned in the
within
document,
this,
isn't
and
it? Yeah.
it builds on and builds on. So it's sort of that ripple effect. They're now wanting to showcase the work we did at Ride and also the Island Green Link work as well, because again, that is highlighted within the transport strategy as well in the strategic investment plan for the Southeast. You know, it does. You know, they want to start using these as best case studies and sort of say this is best practice. The Ride Transport Interchange won an award through colleagues here of Island Roads, putting that through the Chartered Institute of Highways and Transport. So it highlights the good work we're doing, and we can do that through TfSE. They're now turning around to us, say, actually, we could learn lessons in the Isle of Wight. Would you believe it? You know, so.
But we deliver and we deliver well, don't we?
Indeed.
We get
The
opportunity.
people that are judging the award, don't tell them not to look at the palm trees.
Right, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for being, I've got Councillor Jarman, I've got Councillor Nicholson.
Yeah,
I'm just keeping an eye on the
thank you,
time. We do
Chair.
have some more work to go through.
I would express some caution about crediting organisations who were marginally involved in things unduly. I just remark on that. I had a lot of problems with this paper. I was trying to go through and look at specifically what the attachment to the island was and what the improvement of services it would deliver to the island for island businesses and island residents. And I have to say, in that respect, I found it singularly lacking. It does refer to a number of claims, and I'll articulate a couple. Improve productivity and attract investment. Improve health, safety, well-being, quality of life, access to opportunities for everyone. Protect and enhance Southeast's unique natural and historic environment. Reduce journey times between London and left behind coastal communities. I'm sure Yarmouth, by the way, because we should mention Yarmouth a few times here because it was left off, is one of those left behind communities these days. Enhance ferry access to islands, including the Isle of Wight. All laudable claims, but then caveated by the fact that this apparently has no specific financial implications to the council whatsoever. So we're getting all these benefits apparently for nothing. And I just find the credibility of that requires some explanation. So I could hand that over to you.
Yeah, the Isle of Wight contributes towards the partnership. We make an annual submission, I believe it's around £30,000 a year for our membership. And for that, you know, they then take these pieces of work forwards in regards to strategy or case studies and so forth, and also identifying best practice, as well as fighting the corner from DFT, because the DFT, so rather than the TfSE delivering the schemes in which bring us direct benefit here on the island, they generate, it's a bit like that centre of excellence position where they generate the money to undertake feasibility schemes, feasibility reviews, and also business cases, initial business cases, so that then we can draw down the money, because we know that DFT previously, we're getting allocations now, which is really good, and we're moving away from the competitive bidding. However, when it comes to large investment schemes, we're still likely to have to go through a competitive bid process. And so if they've made the work, set out the initial work with strategic case on our behalf for certain elements, even if it's for the regional area, that will benefit us, because we've got a starting point to say, actually, strategically, we're aligning with this. It's now recognised as best practice, and actually, we want this for the island, and this is our part within it. And so we can actually start on that 5-stage business case. But again, we've got the strategic case. We've got an initial economic analysis of that as well. And so we can start then already pushing that through the process. It gives us a starting point that, unfortunately, individual small authorities like ourselves don't get the resource or the funding to pursue. And so this helps us. And they draw down that funding to do that from government. So the government, DFT, have provided them with funding to undertake a number of feasibility reviews, two of which are cross-Solent considerations. So we've got proposal for rapid transit schemes between, so rapid transit means that it's limited stopping, say between Newport and Ryde, and then connecting with the ferries and then travelling elsewhere on a similar basis, up to key locations on the mainland. It could be Q8 Hospital, could be University Hospital Southampton, but we've got two separate studies going on where being funded through TfSE or part funded through TfSE, which will potentially benefit the island. If we overlay that to existing public bus services, you can have something that misses all those stops and is much quicker to make that connection and then onward as well. So these are the sort of things with a benefit from, you know, and this is where they can actually say there are some meaningful outcomes if we can get through to the next stage. This only sets out the initial outline business case, but it gets us a starting point in the process.
You've got a supplementary there?
Yeah, so I'll represent the question in a way. So there are no forward dates for deliverables in here. It's very difficult to actually measure the success that this would bring. I don't see any dates for 26, 27, 28, 29 in terms of what would be delivered for the island articulated in any sense at all. The fact that it's all being delivered without any financial implications on the council, I still find extraordinary, because all of these measures, whether it's putting in a tram or an extended rail system or non-stop buses or an enhanced ferry service, a more frequent ferry service, sounds wonderful. But to do that without there being a financial implication on the council, to get to that point from here, does seem remarkable. I'll just present that again. So are you saying that we don't need any resources at all? No officers, no staff, no money to deliver these resources? Because that's the implication of no financial implication.
Yeah.
Surely all of those would be massive financial implications and huge resource implications if they could ever be realised.
Yeah, no, completely agree. And what this does, so the strategy sets the scene in which what the aspirations are in the strategy, a bit like the Island Transport Plan. But what is due to be updated as well is the strategic implementation plan that sits alongside it, a bit like the local implementation plan will sit beside the Island Transport Plan itself, in which sets out what we need, what we can potentially deliver in the timescales over the next 5, 10, 15 years, how we can potentially fund those. And it will require funding from the local authorities, but it's recognition that additional money will need to come from government, it will need to come from third parties, whether it's developments and so forth, or even operators of the services going forwards, commercial parties as well. And so that is set out. If I should probably reference within the document, it's probably my error, that I should have included the link to the implementation plan as well, because that translates the strategy to what they want to deliver, what they perceive can be delivered by the authorities or those responsible for the infrastructure going forwards. And as I say, they're updating that as well, because again, it's been 6 years since that was, or 5 years since that was drafted, so that needs to be updated. That sets out and addresses those queries you've raised in regards to what is the financial ask and what needs to be done to achieve those targets.
Do you share that with the committee then, once you've got the,
Yeah,
thank you.
and I'll probably bring back the draft implementation plan, but this is where it gets complicated, because the timescales in doing that is potentially going to take us beyond the combined authority discussion. So there is I can certainly provide the link to what's going on at the moment, what they've got, the implementation plan, and their proposal to update it.
Thank you very much. I've got, so just Commissioner, just going to remind you 1 second. It's 7:15. We have got another paper to go through, and I don't really want to extend the meeting unless you would like to extend the meeting. I have to give plenty of notice. So we don't want to extend the meetings. That's helpful. So if we could be mindful that we have to get some work still to do, we'll move on. Yeah, I don't think we're going to be extending the meeting, just love. So I've got, so Councillor John, will you finish there with your questioning, and then I'll bring in.
I'll leave the paper. More work to come. The comments in here, I'm sure you'll take them into account in the next draft. Thank you.
The draft action plan, I think this is it, but it's not changing this.
I just wish that we would call things what they are. I agree with Councillor Jarman. This is far too aspirational to be a strategy. A strategy, in my book, should tell you how. But I'm just worried what this feeds into. It seems to me to be a tick box, self-serving document. But for what purpose? I know we haven't got an economic strategy, and if we had an economic strategy that was fit for purpose, then it could feed into that, because anybody in business knows that the strength of strategies comes from coordination across strategies, and I think this is dreadfully lacking in this council, and I'd like to do something about it. But it's reflective of successive governments, to be honest. Half-baked ideas that are never properly thought out. This is why you end up with people commissioning shipping firms without any bloody boats.
I appreciate your comments. So thank you. Just for your information, the economic strategy is coming to our next committee meeting in October. Yeah. Councillor Ward.
Chairman, before I start, I'd like to say I don't imply any criticism in what I'm about to say. But I mean, transport has always been dear to my heart, and I'm disappointed with this. Let me just stop there. I totally understand the logic of producing a document that matches Transport South East, because, as you say, That's the key to unlocking access. And I think that's a really good point that you make. But we do have to look at ourselves as well. We have basic problems here. Like we have villages, housing estates with no bus. And we talk about, oh yeah, let's, curtail car use and what have you. Many islanders have got no choice. They've got to use their car. This document to me reads like a climate change document. It's all about net zeros, emissions and things like that. I will say I'm disappointed, but I do understand why. Okay, thank you.
Comment rather than you weren't expecting any responses to that. Thank you. So if I'm just going to bring, I can't see my hands up, so I'm going to bring this to a head here. From what we've heard, this is a very high level document, hence why there's not the amount of detail we would like to see with our intimate knowledge of the island that we have and our unique challenges. I'm sure there's probably equal conversations happening in Medway and Isle of Sheppey maybe, and Hailing Island. Who knows that they're disappointed with the level of detail and understanding of the issues they're dealing with themselves. So this is a high level document. We know that there'll be other documents coming forward that are more relevant to us because it will be within the potential mayoral combined authority. So with that caveat that we're disappointed as a committee to see the lack of detail, understanding of our situations that we face vis-a-vis the lifeline of the ferries and even the landslip issues that we are facing as well, which aren't reflected in here. I'm going to propose, I'm going to be a bigger person here and think about the whole region. So I think if we don't have it, then we'll maybe lose out on something in the future. So I think with those caveats, exactly, don't let the perfect get in the way of the good, maybe. So with those caveats, I think if we're heard very clearly, I'll propose that we approve this transport strategy. So I'm proposing that, looking for a seconder. Okay, so okay. So I've proposed it, I've got it seconded by Councillor Ward. Do I have any other proposals coming forward? No, so let's all vote on that. So all those in favour? You got that, Sarah? Yeah. And all those against? There we go. And I think that's a full house of hands up, isn't it? No abstentions. Yeah. Thank you very much, and thank you both for giving up your evenings. And sorry.
Can I just make a suggestion at some point, not for now, we need to move on, that we review membership of Transport for the South East, please, in some way. Don't know how you're going to do that in terms of committee, but I think it's worth a discussion.
That's really helpful. And in the same discussion, maybe talk about solent transport as well in the same, because I think that's probably needs a bit of a revitalisation from what I understand. So that's really helpful. Thank you, Councillor Jordan. And thank you both. Was there anything else you wanted to add to before we move on?
Nothing further for me. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, you probably need to agree that if we're going to get it onto a future committee, aren't you? Otherwise, it'll be just Phil's suggestion. I entirely support it. I've never heard such nonsense in all my life.
Okay, so thank you very much. We'll move on now to the next item, which is our Q1 performance. Performance management, there we go. Service performance and improvement Q1. So I don't know if anyone's presenting this as such. Is Mr. Rowan, over to you? Should we sat there very patiently?
Thanks, Chair. We're not proposing to present anything. We would hope that members have read through the reports and will take questions by exception.
Yeah, thank you. And bearing in mind, we're not a scrutiny committee. So just have that in your head when you ask any questions or comments. So just any takers really, any hands coming up to say anything? Yes, Councillor Brodie, then I've got Councillor Ward.
Yeah, Chair, I mean, essentially, Mr. Rowland's absolutely right. We just asked to know the report, you know, and I mean, it's, you know, I mean, there's a data set here, you know, which appears to be fairly random as far as I'm concerned, and probably the, you know, is it, you know, do we have things that we want to add to it, etc. It's interesting. I mean, just a couple of points that I would make is that, you know, there are random things in there that I think you would probably agree with about retail floor space, which is meaningless to me. There's some measuring of the condition of foot and cycleways against roads, and they're both evaluated against a score of 1 to 20, which I presume is comparable in some way or other. And it's interesting that roads ranges between 17 to 18 out of 20. I don't know, that sounds like fantasy to me. Some of the roads I see on the Isle of Wight. And yet footways and cycleways only range between 13 and 13 and a half, showing once again the priority of island roads when it comes to pedestrians and cyclists on the Isle of Wight. I wish they'd been here to hear me say that, and I did make remarks earlier on when Councillor Garrett asked his question, that I do think that increasingly we forget, you know, that half the population of the island don't have access to a car. I mean, you know, you may not believe that, but check it. They don't have access to a car, and many people are increasingly wishing to cycle, and we don't prioritise them. And that nonsense reply we had to the question from Councillor Redrup earlier about a safe crossing at Wootton Bridge, you know, I just found staggering in the complacency in that, you know, it's okay to knock people over on the road, you know, but we won't worry about that. That's the only thing I will say about this, but I mean, there may be other areas that we would be interested in. You know, I mean, the budget stuff is fairly interesting as well, but I think you've probably got remarks to say about that as well, Chair. So I'll leave it there. Thank you. I haven't got a question. Thank you.
Councillor Ward and Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. It's the very first one, actually, economy and regeneration. If I read.
Page 136 for,
Yeah. It says the number of grants active 11, the value of the grants active 42 million, number of jobs supported 20. Thinking, how can that be? Because, you know, we obviously not managing that somehow. That was it. Can everyone give me an explanation?
yeah. Hang on. I think I've got Mr. Rowan wants to come in.
Yeah, I just wanted to come back on Councillor Brodie's question, really, that the condition measurement was set by the council when it actually set the conditions as part of the contract. If we want to change that, we'd have to change the policy and possibly change the project agreement. So that's the first question. The second one is in terms of, this is an opportunity for the committee to think about other questions they would like to ask about performance, and we can consider those and we can take those forward, particularly on the highways. The highways performance measures that are put forward in the paper are suggestions. If members want other questions, they want to scrutinise something else or scrutinise it in a different way, then we can have that conversation. We can build that up.
Chair, if I just come back since Councillor Rowland was responding to my remarks. Yes, I accept. Yes, that the scale against which roads and footways and cycleways are assessed. What I was drawing attention to was the disparity between them, Mr. Rowlands, that the conditions allegedly of roads score 17 or 18 out of 20, and footways and cycleways round about 13 and a half across the year, which I was drawing attention to the fact that once again, the poor relation is the pedestrian or the cyclist, and I find that very disappointing. Thank you.
Thank you. If I bring you in, Councillor John, I think maybe we've got, sorry, Mr. Rowan, I think we do have our informal briefing set up. I think it maybe can tease some of these issues out within that. I mean, I mean, some of these some of these metrics are mystifying to me. I've presented this on behalf of the Regen, when I was a cabinet member for 4 years, and yet these new ones on retail space, net loss gain, employment floor space, net gain and loss, don't understand why we've got it. Well, maybe it's interesting, but I don't know really why we've got it and what we're going to do with that information, and how it's produced, because all I can think of that it's done on applications. Is it just that there's been a change of use in an employment land? I mean, land doesn't disappear, does it? What happens to it? You know, is that really a health indication of our economy? I don't believe it's. I think it's a bit of a leap to make that. So I think if we can maybe pick up some of the other issues that I think we're all going around in our heads regarding some of these metrics, we can bring that up at one of our briefings. That'd be really helpful, because then we can actually get some really helpful conversations around this, and maybe you can understand what the committee would like to see as far as you know, the metrics presented. So I'm going to go over to Councillor Jarman, then I've got some more questions, but I'll bring in Councillor Quirk and I'll finish with myself. That's okay.
I'll just say that I don't get the 20 jobs with a cost of 2.1 million each. I'm certainly not being paid anything like that by this council, but maybe Ian is, I don't know. But it just seems a very strange calculation, and to leave those figures bare, I think is very strange indeed. There are clearly some issues in the paper with the numbers, and I won't go through them all again. I'll hand my paper in, and whoever wants to have a look at them can do that. You might want to look at paragraph 8 in the paper while I'm talking and asking my question. Perhaps, I'm sure people will do that. I think it's also worth us noting the continued issue with the floating bridge. I know this has come up in a number of forums, but we're looking at close on £1 million here. It seems very odd that we continue to do that, and at the same time, we seem to be embodied on a project which doesn't represent, I believe, the will that was previously expressed by the cabinet when we were under cabinet model. I had thought a decision had been made on this. I thought it was very singular, and I thought we were progressing on it. And what we seem to be doing is perpetuating absolutely tremendous annual spend on this. So I think that deserves some degree of additional explanation, if we could, in public, please.
Sorry, yes, sorry. I've got a question on floating bridge. May I add my question to yours, Councillor Jarman, and then perhaps maybe Mr. Rowan can then again ask us. So I picked up on that as well. The budget and the forecasts, a gap of £158,000. And I was just concerned because it says in the narrative that it was for the annual chains refit. So it's saying that we're replacing the chains annually. That's what the narrative says. So perhaps you could explain that, because to me, I'm going, well, if it's an annual chain change, then why isn't that in the budget? And secondly, does this change in the budget forecast, or the actual spend, sorry, does that feature in the consultation material that the public are now reviewing to be able to make a decision as far their preference to the solution going forward?
Would you like to come in there?
Sorry, Mr. Rowan. Yes, I was over to you now.
Yeah, first of all, back to Councillor Jarman's question. As we set out in the Cabinet report in 2024, we're following a process that follows Treasury Green Book and procurement legislation. So that's the reason why we're going through the process we're going through at the moment. There is a desire for the Cabinet, and they did make it plain that they wanted a floating bridge, a new one. And that's the process we're following in order to reach that through procurement we're looking at millions of pounds of public procurement. So we have to do it in the correct way. And we've rehearsed that in the consultation process we've just gone through, and we will be talking about it when we bring another report to the committee in October. In terms of the budget, the budget was set in 2017 based on an assumption that the new vessel would not need as much maintenance as the old one. That budget hasn't changed. So it's grown because of the need for maintenance that wasn't accounted for. It's grown because of the need for staffing that weren't accounted for. And unfortunately, we are subsidising that floating bridge because the income at the moment is only 700,000 a year. Now, we do need to look at, as well as looking at a new vessel, we need to look at ways in which to significantly increase that income. Because if we're going to produce another service, another vessel, it would still need to meet the costs that are required, A, for running the vessel, but B, for possibly servicing a loan to pay for that new vessel. So all that sort of commercial and process and all the process of looking at an output specification is something that we will be discussing with the committee in October when we bring the report forward.
Thank you. Councillor Quirk.
Very quick one, just in terms of the things we're measuring, I'm not sure how easy it is to measure, but actually the loss of jobs on the island is quite significant. Some of that's central government policy, but some of it's things that we actually we prioritise. Just as an example, the cliff paths in Shanklin, since they've been closed, the tea gardens at the top has closed, the hotel at the top has closed and been sold off as now residential. 3 of the hotels on the seafront have changed hands and have all downgraded their size. And the evening economy on the Esplanade has been devastated. There are things that our actions have implications that are good and that are bad. And we maybe need to measure some of the negative implications of what we do, as well as the positive.
Thank you. And just the Get Solent working plan actually went to the Health and Wellbeing Board. That was the way it was dictated by government, should go down the Health and Wellbeing Board rather than coming to our committee. And I did share that with you all a few weeks ago. So I think there'll be some more information on that as we get to our economic strategy. But there are, I think there is a target of 2,000 jobs. We've got a gap of 2,000 jobs to fill on the Isle of Wight.
1,000 to bring us up to the regional average.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. So as we're looking at the economic inactive, that's a particular focus there at the minute. So I think it's some really interesting stuff here as well. And when I used to sit over there when it was with cabinet, I would always be very so proud, and I still am, of One Leisure. And we can see again how the number of one cars has gone up, and we're now. I think we had the final figures yet, but my indicative figures is that we're back in the black now. Pre-COVID, it was contributing to the council coffers, and we're moving towards that again. So I think it's been brilliant the way that they've recovered that service, which supports thousands of islanders to support their own health, as well as teaching our young people to swim and take part in other sports as well. So I'm just really pleased. I'll always be an advocate for One Leisure and a proud One Card holder myself. I think it's always worth saying about the number of visits to museums. I think that's a really impressive increase there. And it seems like the community days they've been doing and the pound days really helps that service and helps us all connect with our history on the island. It's so important part of belonging, understanding your culture. The tiny little flag, and I don't know why it is. It's the issues from the council libraries. That's actually people going in and getting a book, I think, or a DVD or whatever it is. That has come down, so maybe it's a bit more information on that. Maybe at one of our briefings might be really helpful. And I don't know if that includes the e-books as well that go out. We've got actually a really good free service where you can rent e-books as well. So we have a very good service there. So we've done the floating bridge. We obviously some of the grants, the page on the grants, we have had some changes there. Like for instance, the Green Link now got longer to finish that project, and we've actually now got more money as well that's indicated there. And some of the other ones are being almost completed. So I think that was that we're going to cover that later. Cover that again. So I'll just going through the pages here. And I suppose the Records Office inquiry, we did touch on this at our last informal briefing, because we've now got a new measure here now and talks about increasing it says that then there's national trend of more research being completed online. I think as a committee, I think we're very interested in how we can increase accessibility, especially digital accessibility to our wonderful records on the island. I think that was touched on. So I think that would be, we'd like to see that come forward at a later date. So that's it from me, everything. We can pick up other items in our informal briefings and put them on the work plan as needed. So I'm taking the silence that we've now finished with this. Councillor Jarman.
Thank you, Chair. Everybody's trying to race away. I just wanted to pick up on one point that was raised earlier, that the additional costs, yes, it's led to an overspend, but the overspend doesn't represent the total amount of money that we're putting in. The cost of running the floating bridge is over 1.7 million, and the revenue that we're getting in from it is dwarfed by the council contribution. So we as a council are putting more money into it than the total revenue which it is generating from customers. Just to put that into perspective. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for bringing that up, because I think it's worthwhile saying that tomorrow is the last day that anyone can complete the floating bridge survey. So I would, anyone listening or anyone of the press are going to report on this online, I would encourage everybody to take advantage and make their views known via the online survey. So we're going to move on now to our last item, which is our committee work plan. So we've formerly known as the forward plan. So I would just like to propose the add-ons there from the proposal by Councillor Jordan that we put on there to review membership of Transport for South East and Solent Transport. Solent Transport, is that actually still going? Is Solent Transport still going?
Existing name, but it's not, yeah.
So yeah, there is a form of Solent Transport because we felt it was important to continue those priorities forward into the mayoral authority. So yes, we are still meeting. There isn't at the moment political membership of it. It's sort of running in the background. So I don't think you would need to include it within that discussion. When the Strategic Transport Authority within the mayoral authority is fully decided, if it has a bigger role to play, then we'll bring it back here for membership. Yeah,
that makes sense. So maybe this isn't an urgent item, I'm saying. So we see once we get through devolutions, I think once we take our votes in October-ish time, then we'll know if we're having a combined authority, mayoral authority or not. So obviously then TFs, because if we do, then we're looking at the mayor, that board making decisions, because it'll be devolved down. If we don't make a decision to go forward down that route, we go to the back of the queue, which could be years away. So then this becomes more important, I'm guessing. So if we wait this.
Yeah. At some point, we're looking into a glass ball, but at some point in the future, in a devolved combined authority, you're going to need some kind of organisation that delivers and is occupied with your transport strategy. And so transport is already in existence in that.
So what I was trying to suggest
was
that the timing of this discussion, really, that's what I was trying to get at. It's not one for next month, is it?
Sure.
Chris, Councillor Brodie.
I think we were at cross purposes there. I think Councillor Jordan thought I was referring to the Solent thing, and I'm referring to Transport for South East.
Yes.
I mean, I have a fundamental problem with the whole concept of the South East region. I think it's farcical that we run from like Margate to the Isle of Wight. I mean, first, we have far more in common in many ways with Dorset and further west and northwest of here than the South East region. And this is all a legacy of the late John Prescott, isn't it? Who created these regions, back in the late 1990s. And the southeast one is by far the largest, with the largest population, and is the most heterogeneous of them all. I'm from the northeast, and there's the northeast region, and it's entirely homogenous, almost. Whereas this one's just farcical. And from Kent down to the Isle of Wight and Hampshire, it doesn't make any sense. That's one of the main reasons whenever I see anything that's on a regional basis, I say, well, what's the merits in it? I don't believe that, that whether we go into devolution or not, that there's any value in that document that we've just presented, to be honest. I have no can't believe that we will get any serious money from it. I heard what Stuart said, you know, yeah, but I don't think that's significant personally. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So we're just getting back to the work plan agenda item in front of us. Is there anything that, apart from the TfSE? Yes, councillor Quirk.
We've got the transport plan consultation. I would like that to be worded in such a way that we can talk about things like the future of transport, because when we get a devolved administration and a devolved mayor, they're going to suddenly have some money to spend, and they're going to start allocating that money fairly quickly. And if we haven't got oven-ready projects, then we're likely to miss out on some of those. And there are issues around the ferries that we should have our plan. And we've got a lovely plan in terms of the environment, but actually in terms of rural transport, that's not where it's heading. It's talking about all the nice things and walking and alternate routes.
So we've got the outcome of the consultation coming to us in January.
I think we just need the detail in there of the real projects that we're looking. The ones that would seem to me to be appropriate would be something like the ferries, something like something to move traffic off of Coppins Bridge somehow. One route might be fixed.
If I can stop you there for a second.
We need to have that that we can debate it. That's the word.
If I can stop you there for a second. So this item is just about our work plan. So we have that. We have the outcome of the consultation coming in January. There'll be the final document which we'll feed into and we'll discuss at that point. Will be coming to us prior to May.
Yeah, it will be. So the proposal is that we will present to committee the summary of the consultation outcomes, how that's reflected within the revised draft of what would hopefully be the final draft of the transport strategy to go to full council. It'll also be going to PFR as well, because it's one of the key policies. So it's being aware at that point. What I can offer is a draft of the implementation plan that I referenced earlier, a bit like the implementation plan for TfSE, which will set out what we intend to do over the next few years, over the lifetime of the local transport plan, so that you can see what we're, turning those strategies and high-flying ideas into practice and what that potentially looks like, and where the finances from that are likely to come from, where we're going to be making those big asks. But I can offer that.
That's really helpful. I think maybe at one of our briefings we can go dig a bit deeper into one of our monthly briefings. Yes, I'm keen to move on.
I'm only a temporary member of this committee, but to my way of thinking, one of the things that I think the committee ought to be considering is, I mean, I'm really pleased that we've got an economic strategy. Let's hope it's fit for purpose, and let's hope it's written by an economist and not somebody from Parks and Gardens. But I think that the Isle of Wight Council is missing out greatly in the development of the Isle of Wight, because what we've got happening at the moment, as you know yourself, in fact, I've called you the grandmother of place plans, but we've got place plans developing in the Isle, in various locations in the Isle of Wight, and place plans are instrumental in the development of those areas. But they're all going off in different tangents. So what you haven't got a hub to draw those spokes together. And the Isle of Wight is small enough for the Isle of Wight Council to have a place plan to PAS 184, the placemaking standard. And with that and an economic strategy, because the two go hand in hand, then you start to tear down and it makes sense, and you draw together all those elements of the spokes. And as I said before, the strength in having strategies is the coordination of those strategies, because at the moment it's like a ship without a rudder.
Appreciate that. Thank you. I mean, yes, I'm a great fan of place plans. Maybe again, Ms. Rowan, perhaps we can have that as a discussion at a future briefing, and then we can have because I think that was really helpful, our last briefing, and then we can maybe bring an item to our work plan when we formulate in our head exactly what that looks like. So no more hands going up. So thank you everybody for your perseverance and all of your really great questions and the time you've taken to go through your papers. So it's now 19:48 and the meeting's now closed. Thank you.